Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. And we got more Candace Owens. This time, Nick Fuentes. The feud is real. That being said, if you have any comments, leave them throughout the show. Reread them all. No need to super chat. So,
Yes, because we're not monetized.
okay, let's get right into Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens.
Yes. Do you want to explain? Because I actually don't really, I haven't seen any of this. So.
Well, we can go through the clips, play them one by one, and then we'll discuss them kind of as we go. But I think Fuentes actually, you hate Nick Fuentes.
Yes.
I don't mind him.
I don't, again, hate is a very strong word. I disagree with him on basically everything he's trying to implement. And I think he doesn't even understand his own ideas or what he's espousing or what he's asking for.
Okay, well, this is one of the times you actually do agree with him. So
maybe. I don't know. I don't know what he says.
I like him, but this is one of the times I actually disagree with him because I like Candace as well.
Hold on. So Dom Lucas says, Nick Fuentes is now questioning Candace Owens' claims of ending threats by the Macrons and allegations.
Hail Macron, honestly, it's just such a Faustian way of dealing with Russian propagandists. Do you think Candy will be hiding in Moscow by the end of the year?
No, I mean, look, I will believe it when I see evidence. Here's the thing. Candace Owens says, oh, they're trying to kill me. We haven't seen a shred of evidence. Like, where's the evidence? She just sounds crazy. She's going on Instagram saying that Brigitte Macron's ancestors were chocolatiers in Nazi Germany. I'm not making this up. They're Judenrat chocolatiers. They're Jewish spies or something, or they're ratting out the Jews. I didn't follow that, actually, what she was saying about that. But that's the word she used. She said they were like Jewish spies in Nazi Germany running a chocolatier. They were chocolatiers. Then they came over to America in Project Paperclip. And then Brigitte Macron was a victim of MK Ultra and the Stanford prison experiment. And then she was given over to Macron to like spy on him on behalf of Israel. And that's why Macron is protected by Mossad. Like, that's the story. And Charlie Kirk was killed because she was going to blow the whistle. And now she's going to get killed by the French. And it's like, what a coincidence that all those conspiracies are connected to this, right? Like, Brigitte Macron, and like, you know what is really funny? Their only evidence that Brigitte Macron is a man is that they ran her face through facial recognition AI, and she has a partial match with a childhood photo of her brother. That's the evidence. And from that, we are getting the rest. So we are extrapolating, this 80-year-old woman looks like this.
Okay. And
honestly, it's just such a Faustian.
I actually disagree with him a bit. I don't believe the whole thing, but I haven't seen all the evidence and she hasn't put all the evidence out there. Is it possible? Yes, especially with the way the elites in Europe are. Now, I know Nat has a completely different opinion on this. It's funny because Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens typically are on the same side of America First and MAGA. We definitely have different opinions of both people, so...
Do you want to keep watching it or no? It just reloaded.
Yeah, there's more, yeah.
And her face through facial recognition AI, and she has a partial match with a childhood photo of her brother. That's the evidence. And from that, we are getting the rest. So we are extrapolating, this 80-year-old woman looks like this grainy photo of her brother as a child. So based on that, we could go back to the French Revolution. The Trognos were missionaries during the White Lotus Rebellion in China. That's why they call the show White Lotus. Centuries later, they're Frankists. And they're in Nazi Germany making chocolate, and then they get sent to America with Werner Braun and Project Paperclip. Then they're in Stanford prison experiment and getting MK Ultra. Now they killed Charlie Kirk. And they're like Forrest Gump. They're like Forrest Gump times 6 million. The Trognos. It's like sympathy for the devil. They were the Knights Templar. They were the Illuminists. They were the Masons. They were the Bolsheviks. They were the Nazis.
Pretty good. And we can kind of get your thoughts on it because I disagree with them. I like Candace, and I'm willing to wait out and see the evidence. And she had put more evidence than just the pictures out there to kind of relate it. So I will say he does not like Candace. That's why he has that opinion. He definitely wants to discredit her because they're sharing the same space. They're sharing the same audience as well.
Well, I think she's very good, again, as I said, at weaving together a narrative and being able to, she's very convincing. So the way she presents her evidence is by trying to find tiny little breadcrumbs that might match, but then making it sound like they match a lot more than they do.
Okay, well, I disagree, but it's funny that you and Fuentes are actually agreeing for once because I know how much you dislike him.
Well, again, it's not that I'm agreeing with him. It's just that he noticed something that I think me and a lot of other people have noticed about Candace, and especially about these latest allegations that the French are coming together, the French Foreign Legion, which again are not French people, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's a long list of et ceteras.
Technically, they do become French once they get citizenship through the French Foreign Legion. If
Yes,
you do
but
a
they're not
10-year,
French people
well, what makes a French person French?
being born in France.
Okay,
That's it.
let's go to the next clip if you want.
From Kaiser Rev, Nick Fuentes cringes at Candace Owens, as do we all. She has full-blown lost it. Somebody got mad at me last stream saying that she had lost the plot, but she has. Look at her.
She's making fun of the entire thing here. She hasn't lost the plot. I don't think so at all.
I think maybe she hasn't lost the plot, but it is a very useful thing to get more and more attention on her.
You don't get to ask those questions. What's wrong with you, Mom? Why are you so scared?
Oh. Oh man, I've seen this like 100 times in the past few days. Oh jeez, she's lost it, man. She is full-blown Looney Tunes. Does she even know what's going on anymore? One day it's the Israel, then it's the feds, then it's an inside job, then it's Dairy Queen, then it's the Society of Bee Worshippers, then it's Brigitte Macron. Like, bro, take your medication. That's crazy. She needs to get 5150. And I know that's like a sensitive subject because we're mutual friends of Ye. When you're crazy, sometimes that you just need the help,
You don't
right?
get to ask those questions. What's wrong with you, Mom? Why are you so scared?
Like, you can see what she's going
Okay,
for.
that's
Like,
pretty good.
she's-
And he's
she's
really,
trying
we can
this
obviously see he's trying to discredit her at a moment of weakness. This is definitely a moment of weakness.
Well, she was
but
she was doing it on purpose. She was imitating someone.
Yeah, I know, but even on the other clip, and there's multiple clips out there, I've just chosen the ones I like the best. That being said, she attacked him first, so I do understand that he's coming back at her. I think if she would have been a lot nicer on their interview that they had together, she really kind of ambushed him, and I think that's where the animosity started. And now you're seeing her get kind of attacked from her own side here.
Again, can we stop it with the sides, with the, oh, you agree with this person, so now you're fully for him, or you don't
Nope.
agree with this person, so you're completely against
First
them.
of all,
Like,
nobody
no,
said that.
Nuance.
No, nobody said
You
that.
said that. You said, oh, now you don't hate him. It's like, well, I never hated
Well,
him.
no,
I just
'cause I-
disagree and think he's dumb.
Because I always say I agree with some of the things he says, but I disagree with a lot of the others. I say nobody's in that space. And you'll see by the articles I actually gathered today,
The posts.
this is going to kind of come up. Yeah, the articles.
The posts.
Yeah, the articles.
Hold on. Sean, formerly artist John Cusack says, that's a great question about who is French. Being a citizen of France is not the same thing as being French. French means you have French ancestry, and that goes back a bit further than a couple of days. Exactly. Thank you. I've been saying this for a while, and especially because I am Mexican from Mexico, and it has always bothered me that Mexicans in the US that were born there, got all the privileges from there, don't understand and would never come to Mexico, and they'd be too scared, and they have never lived a day in their lives here. They don't like to eat the actual tacos or the actual food we have here, and yet they call themselves Mexican, and they call themselves offended for being XYZ or for ICE coming to get them, even though they're US citizens. That annoys me a lot.
Yeah, and I was kind of trying to poke at with that question there because we all know what's going on with immigration within the EU and the United States, and really asking these questions, what makes you European or what makes you French, I think is very important to kind of outline now, because they are really trying to flood Europe with mass immigrations from cultures that really don't mix, like the Muslim culture. It's like trying to mix oil and water. We see crime rates just rising in the EU. EU elites would say, well, maybe not in the first generation, you're not French or an EU citizen, but the second and third generation, it's completely the same thing. And it really is not.
And I also think it's about the culture, the tradition, the following, the social contract of that specific country or that specific place where you are, understanding the idiosyncrasies and nuances of being in that country and having lived in that country for a long time, generations even.
Well, I would even say the EU, France, everywhere in Europe pretty much has a Christian moral foundation. And as you flood it with Islam, the loyalty lies with Islam for a lot of those immigrants. And the culture really does change at its root foundation after generations. And it's a problem. That's why you have to limit the number of immigration, really save the culture, save what makes being French, French, and European, European.
But now I don't even know if it's savable because they've forgotten it for so long that I don't know if it's recoverable.
Well, I think it is recoverable. I don't think it's too far gone. I think if the elites can kind of be pushed out and a new governing class can kind of get in there that aligns with the citizens, I don't think it is too late because they don't have over a 50% majority of Islam yet. But in certain cities, they do. I do understand that.
And in certain like townships and counties and etc. And I do think it comes down to where you spent most of your childhood because those are the formative years. And if the culture when you're spending your child there is already fractured or has already been taken over, then no matter how French, for example, you're raised or how British you're raised, it has already been broken to the point where you're not being taught what it actually means, the culture, the values, the traditions, because those are no longer acceptable.
Well, I think definitely, because you can look at places like the United States and Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes just on the last clips. They're both Americans, but everybody keeps bringing race into everything. And I think race has a lot less to do with it. And what has a lot more to do with it is the moral foundation of Christianity and stuff like this. And when you're trying to mix different religious foundations, they're really not mixing well. We're seeing that now. Why? Because their moral foundation lies with a different culture in general.
Yeah, and Temple's channel, their whole culture war goes British, where they're bringing in, talking with guys from Lotus Eaters and other content creators from the UK. They had a really good discussion actually about this and how the culture has been taken over and has been degraded by the multiculturalism that just doesn't work.
Well, you also have to ask yourself, I mean, we're playing clips after clips after clips. It's Christmas season now, and you're seeing Muslims run riots within these Christmas festivals. They're burning down Christmas trees.
The Christmas markets.
They're not willing to accept what the foundation of that what the foundation of that society is. Yet the people of those countries are very welcoming of Islam overall. So it's crazy how they're the ones they're the outsiders coming in, yet they're completely against the moral the traditions of that
because
society.
the whole point is the takeover of the society. And that is, and people don't want to admit that and don't want to see it, but that is the end goal. I mean, imam after imam keeps coming out from Germany, in the US, in the UK, saying that is their main purpose and that is why they're there. And that should be their end goal, other than the other end goals they have.
Well, I used to live in Canada and the United States. That's primarily where I grew up. Now I live in Mexico now, and it's good to see a homogenized culture where a lot of this crap really hasn't happened.
Well, now there's the crap coming in from the Caribbean over to Mexico. So
but it's not
a lot of, and it is differing, and it has been different because, funnily enough, talking about, I wouldn't say conquered.
No, hold on. It's not to the same extent because I grew up in Canada. And
not to the same
Canada
extent. We're starting to see it here.
They don't have a culture in Canada. It no longer exists. They've gotten rid of it through mass immigration. It's one of those countries that you can really say this is what the globalists want for their end state. There is no real homogenized moral structure or culture there. When you come to Mexico, immigration is just starting to happen, but Mexico is really the first few phases of immigration. Canada is the end state that the globalists want people to go towards.
But I wouldn't even say now with social media and the internet, etc., it's just about the immigration component. Yes, we're actually in Mexico accepting way more asylum seekers from lower down south and the rest of Latin America, but it is also about social media and what gets put up and propped up as the better culture, or the culture we should be following. And here, partially because of the oppressor-oppressed dichotomy, a lot of things from, for example, Venezuela, from Colombia, from other Latin American countries are now infesting their way into Mexico as well.
But I will say this, even the type of immigration that Mexico is getting, they're very lucky because it's very similar to the immigration America had. Hold on.
But it's not.
Because primarily the immigration the United States got for decades was Mexican immigration, and they had a Christian moral foundation. So they mixed a lot better than what's coming over to Europe, which is a Muslim immigration that is really trying to take over the country and change the moral foundation. That means,
And African. Hold on. Duck Pigs says Candace is in love with Nick. I wouldn't be surprised. And because I don't like to jump on conspiracy theories, I won't fully detail what it is, but it seems like her husband should also be looked into and what he likes and maybe dislikes.
Well, let's just say, because you were telling me yesterday and I had no idea about this.
Well, that's just a giant rumor. I that's why I don't want to like fully bring it up.
The
because
audience
again,
loves to hear the chisme.
Chisme means gossip.
I guess there's rumors going around that Candace's husband may be gay and that Candace is his beard.
Yes.
I said there's no way that's possible. They're just spitting out kids, and you're like, well, that's the perfect cover up. I love Candace and I actually love Nick as well. I like both of them very much, but I disagree vehemently with some of their opinions, and I always point out those opinions that I don't agree with them with. But it was interesting when you kind of brought that up, because I had always pointed out Candace's husband, he is extremely rich and with a very
the UK,
a very well-known family within the UK. So it was always kind of strange to me that she did have so much money, but she was pointing all this stuff out. It kind of put a bell in my ear saying maybe she works for the government. But
yes. Well, that would be another interesting conspiracy theory about Candace and Nick, even like that they are, working with either the U.S. government or some other entity.
Well, yeah, I would say Candace, Nick, and Tucker, and I love them all, but I'm always very wary that they may be working for the CIA. I know it sounds crazy, but I don't think I'm the only one that thinks that as well.
No.
So I take everything they say with a grain of salt. I really analyze what they say. I do give a lot of leeway, especially to people like Candace. I know this conspiracy, especially when Nick points it out. He articulates it very well. Yeah, she may sound crazy, but she said crazy things in the past where she's actually pitched a lot of good evidence. So I'm willing to kind of wait this one out and see what happens. Also, you were always kind of pointing out Officer Tatum as saying Candace is crazy. He's kind of changed his position a little bit.
Well, no, and actually he corrected someone that said that, he's now believing her and he's going to help her with the plot and what might happen to her. And he came out and said, no, he just opened the door for the possibility of it being true. And because he didn't want to outright dismiss the allegations in case they are true, and then something happens and he's like, my friend, because they're still friends, kind of, I think, something happened to my friend and I was saying it wasn't true, then I think he was just trying to cover all his bases.
Well, he does have,
and that's what I said. If it turns out to be true, then I'll eat my words and say, sure, she was completely right. The French are coming after her, the Masons, everybody.
Well, Officer Tatum did have her number, so he actually did call her, and then I think they kind of ironed things out a little bit.
Well, he said she still hasn't sent him the evidence. He said that today, and she said she would. Which, again, like little X mark.
I'm willing to give a little leeway here and see what happens. I am sure Candace is going to have amazing ratings, especially when she comes back, especially after that last post she kind of put. So I'm definitely going to watch.
And that's what that post was for, exactly, for people to go see her.
And a lot of her podcast, she was going so in depth, and my attention span, I'll admit, isn't the best. So I kind of tuned out a few months ago, but I'll keep up here or there. I watch her clips. I used to watch her show every day. That being said, she's probably got me back because I'm going to watch the full episodes when she does come back.
And that's also why I always say, at least in my Spanish show, which is after this show at 9:30 p.m. Mexico City, if you want to see it, Nat and the Guy in Spanish. But in my show, I always tell like who's watching me and who's listening to me and to myself that's why I never say I love any content creators, political pundits, commentators, because I'm always open and I always want to not always agree with them on everything. And I do want to be able to question, and I do want to be able to say, they might be wrong in this, they might be wrong in that. And I think that fostering of critical thinking has gone out the window, especially with Candace, with people not even being able to explain why they're trying to defend her. And I'm like, you don't have to defend her. It's fine if someone has a different opinion than her on something, or if we disagree with her on something, or if somebody disagrees with me on something as well.
Well, I think the next...
and I'm fine with that.
I think
I think a lot of people have lost that ability to say, I still like to listen to that person, I still respect that person, and I will continue to do so, even if I don't agree with them on every single thing they say.
Skip the next article, we'll come back to it.
We have a few more comments.
Okay.
Sean, formerly artist John Cusack, sorry, it's a long name, says Christianity seems to function well.
Wait, what's his name?
Sean, formerly artist John Cusack.
Oh, okay.
I can't actually say.
I got a
the
funny story
actual
about John
name.
Cusack. because
It's not John Cusack. It's like a play on words of John Cusack,
okay.
but I can't read it on the stream.
Maybe I won't say the story about John Cusack.
So Sean, I'm just going to say Sean. Sean says Christianity seems to function well with Judaism, and on both sides, there's people that would disagree. I think.
Well, no-
I'm personally not religious, but I do speak a lot on religion, and I studied quite a bit about religion. But go ahead.
Yeah, I would say, I think the two cultures do work very well, and they have a history together of the Old Testament and the New Testament. I will say I'm very hard on Israel under Netanyahu and the amount of wars that are being started. I can see both sides of this. If Israel had a different leader and they were a little bit more moderate in their behavior, especially to their neighbors, and really trying to make economic ties to have more peace in the region, which I think Trump is trying to bring there, I would say, yeah, the two religions actually do work really well together. And we've seen they've really kept their own identities in America, yet they've known how to respect one another. So
Kind of. And in a way, I mean, one, like it or not, on both sides, they are kind of connected, at least. I mean, and the others I think, tried to, latch on to that connection. But from the inception, from the beginning of both, they were, they're interconnected, no matter how you try to spin it.
we do got a long history now of countries like Canada, like the United States, what's going on in Europe with what immigrant populations worked well together, what don't work well together. There was also an experiment, I forgot what country it was. They were housing a lot of different prisoners, and what they noticed they were tracking where each prisoner was from and what their social ability with one another was. Filipino prisoners were considered the easiest to integrate. They were studying within the prison how prisoners would act towards one another and how they would get along, how they wouldn't, so they can kind of put that information to use within the EU, I believe. They were seeing there were certain Eastern European countries that were completely did not integrate at all. Every time in every experiment they did, because they would use different prison yards, that this one country would create a gang and completely take over the prison yard, even if they were outnumbered by other prison populations.
And speaking of Christianity, just to round out that point, that is one of the things that I think Nick Fuentes, when he says what he says, other than his whole idea of National Socialism, essentially, which would be
I have something about that
the 1940s, and the mixing with the far left and the crazies and the commies and etc. that Nick is trying to do.
Well, wait, hold on. A lot of people might not know because it's quite a new idea. Okay. Nick Fuentes has talked a lot about National Socialism and reaching out to the far left, which would be...
If you don't know what National Socialism is or what it's shortened to, it's the Yahtzees from the 1930s.
He's talking about reaching over to Hassan Piker. A lot of people think when 2028 comes, if this Trump tariff experiment fails and there's no real vision for capitalism going forward to have a massive change, that they might actually have an opportunity. I have something else that happened today that is actually making that theory come more of a possibility. And now I don't necessarily agree with it. I want to see what happens with Trump. I don't think we're necessarily in late stage capitalism. The population isn't decreasing. It's still growing slightly. It's going to stall out here. It makes capitalism a lot harder. But this idea of national capitalism, that tariffs with tariffs, is really an opportunity to rebirth capitalism, especially I don't want to see it going authoritarian like the EU is going right now.
Yes.
But continue.
Well, I was just going to say, I think a lot of the things Nick is envisioning, and when he talks about his faith and etc., he's a Catholic, and in the end, Catholics, and again, here in Mexico, we have about 78% Catholic population. They ultimately do respond to the Vatican, and when America was founded, it was founded upon Christian values, but they were actually very against the founding fathers, etc., were very against that connection still to the Vatican, to the Pope, to an external source. And Catholics were pretty much rejected when America was being founded and formed.
Yeah, I'm not saying all popes are bad, but the last few popes we have are complete globalists.
So that's why I think Nick has no idea what he's talking about when he talks about American tradition and values and etc. He, with his own faith, is going kind of against that.
Yeah, I think the last few popes we had are complete globalists, and they're on board with this one world government, one world religion. We see these religions try to come together. I mean, I'm not for that. I do like Catholicism, just not when they're following the Pope blindly, because I think a lot of the information and the direction the Pope's trying to steer the Catholic population right now isn't the right direction. I like decentralization of religion, and I think you see a break of a lot of the civilians or Catholics from the Pope. They don't like the direction the Catholic Church is going right now.
And Rafa says, hello, Rafa. That is one example of somebody that is really good to us, as always here, but that disagrees with me in some things, and I like it. Sean, sorry, I can't read your full name. Sean says, I am from Los Angeles, and through mass immigration, I lost my place of birth. I miss it. I hate the weather here in Oregon. Oregon is very similar to Vancouver, which is where we live. Well, I lived for 13 years.
Well, I grew up between Vancouver, Canada, and Los Angeles, California, actually Long Beach, California. So I definitely know the area. And yeah, it is just an absolute mess.
But even when you were growing up there was already those issues and that lack of integration in some ways.
Yeah, there's a ton of issues because the government itself is just they're so far left. I mean, the policies they try to implement in California are just so radical, and it's part of the reason we left Canada. But California is a good example of a U.S. state that's very similar to Canada.
And Oregon too.
Yeah, Oregon.
Portland,
Well, I'd say Washington, Oregon, and California, and they connect right up. Yeah, the whole
mess.
The whole left coast.
Yes, exactly. Sean says, question for you guys. Being in Mexico, do you guys eat breakfast burritos for breakfast? No, that's not a thing. It is a thing up north in the northern states that are close to the U.S., like Chihuahua, Sinaloa, etc. But I mean, here in the surroundings of Mexico City, it's everything from like quesadillas to chilaquiles to molletes to huevos rancheros to huevos divorciados to a lot of egg-based stuff. But
it's primarily tamales, and if you go to every single corner here, there are little family-owned tamale businesses that just sit up every morning, and everybody goes there for breakfast primarily.
Because it's a very hearty breakfast. Yeah. And it is a lot of calories with a little bit of meat. So it actually does sustain you for quite a lot longer than even a breakfast burrito.
And then after the tamale shop shut down, I'd say the torta, they either transferred to a torta shop, or a torta shop kind of replaces them. Tortas are
tacos, and then like fondas, which are like little family-owned restaurants as well, but they do a lot of traditional Mexican food, or like a menu of the day kind of thing.
You're jumping ahead. I don't think a lot of people know what tortas are. Tortas are big sandwiches. So breakfast.
And you say very funny.
So for breakfast, people typically have tamales here,
or
and then
as well.
tortas, and I'd say tacos and stuff for dinner.
Not for dinner.
Oh yeah.
For dinner?
Yeah.
People don't have big dinners here unless you're going out to eat.
Or late lunch.
It's because here we have lunch around 2:30 or 3. And he calls that dinner, but that's not dinner. Then we do have dinner around 8 or 9 p.m. But thank you for your question. But yes, very, very different things. But now that I think you would see, especially in Los Angeles, for example, in Mexican restaurants as well.
And Mexican American food is way different because I used to live in Los Angeles, and there was this little Mexican restaurant called Alberto's, and I absolutely love it. I still love American Mexican food because it's just packed full of guacamole and different kinds of salsas and stuff. And I love the taste of American Mexican food, and it's a ton of cheese on everything. Here, that's not the case. No. I still like Mexican food, but American Mexican food, because I grew up with it, and I love the guacamole and cheeses, I love it.
And the variety is a lot different from what, I feel at least, and having lived in Vancouver and missing food from here for the last 13 years, the variety that we have here is nothing like or similar to the variety or what is offered or what Americans, I guess, think is Mexican food.
Yeah, maybe
it's not even the right type of cheese that they use over there.
Well, yeah, it's different kinds of cheeses here. Maybe we can skip the next article.
Hold on, because we have a lot more.
We do, okay.
Hold on. There's a lot.
I will say one more thing, because I was talking about this horseshoe theory with Nick and Hassan, and it's just starting to come up. And you're really seeing Tucker, people like Tucker and Candace. I think if the Trump tariff economic plan kind of fails, this horseshoe theory is going to get really popular
especially through the Supreme Court.
Come 2028, and then you would say, well, they would have to have to take over a party like Trump did with the Republicans, and I kind of seeing libertarianism is kind of set up in the United States, and it could possibly be taken over by this idea. Dave Smith is in that circle. There's currently a battle going on for libertarianism right now. There's a content creator called Liquid Zulu. He's an amazing debater. He's a crazy guy with red hair. He's going to start debating Dave Smith soon. And I think that's really the battle for libertarianism, because libertarianism actually has parties set up in a lot of states. They're going to be on the ballot automatically. So you can't just start a new party from scratch. We kind of seen how RFK failed at that. And that was one of the big lessons to learn from RFK. So I think if this National Socialist idea does come to fruition in 2028, it will happen probably maybe through libertarianism, or they could possibly take over and revamp the Democratic Party.
I don't think it could take over. Sean says, Nat, you're always fun on WDW Pro. Thank you. Oh, that's where you're coming from. Thank you so much. I try. Sometimes I'm not sure if I'm saying things correctly, or if I'm going off too long, or like just ranting, because that's what I usually do when I'm left to my own devices. And he's always there to kind of balance me out and shut me up when I'm going off on a tangent. But thank you.
Well,
much.
Because I watch her in English and then she does her Spanish show, but she's so much more animated in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish that well, or at all. But you're so much more animated in Spanish. That being said, on WDW Pro, you're very unanimated. Even in
Because I'm
English.
trying to be like nice and respectful, and, wait my turn. Sean says it's a long story. Okay, I don't know what was a long story, but and then Sean says the far right and far left have more in common than they would ever let on or acknowledge. Exactly, and those, in my opinion, that is the danger of both. That they're both seeking systems that would not work, or we have seen destroy countries on both ends.
And I think you're right. They have a lot more in common than they've realized, and now you have major content creators kind of pointing that out that are in the political sphere, and their theory to bring them together is the left has to give up immigration and adopt nationalism, and the right will have to adopt some social programs like Medicare for all and other things. I think that's enough to actually unite the two. If Trump's plan, where he's going with tariffs, fail. And the reason I keep saying if it fails, because the Supreme Court is going to be ruling on the decision whether the tariffs were even legal very early next year. It's expected in January or February. That will dictate the midterms and dictate the rest of, I think, Trump's term in office if they go against him.
Although in the past 2 days, he's been going way harder at a lot of things. So I think the base is finally saying like, oh, okay, he's not asleep fully.
Yeah, we have a ton of
He
stories.
hasn't been asleep at the wheel forever now.
We have a ton of stories when we go into the U.S. Trump realizes that he's moving away from his base and he has to reunite it, especially if he wants to have any chance in the midterms, because all the small elections that came up, the random elections in the last few months, have gone heavy in the direction of Democrats, not necessarily because people support the Democrats. There's just a lot of bad press for Trump, number one. But number two, he has gone away from his base and become more of a corporatist over the last few months. So I think he's realizing that. He still has a year to the midterms. And if he does reunite with the base and follow through on a lot of his promises, I think he has a good chance. I hope so, because I want to see this tariff experiment actually played out and see what happens.
And Rafa says, Pope Pius the 13th. I'm really bad at Roman numerals, but I think Pope Pius the 13th was an amazing pope.
Yeah, there was a lot of amazing popes, but I will say this, over the last decade and the last few popes we've had, it's really made me question following blind allegiance to a leader like the Pope. So.
And Sean says, I am from San Pedro, so yeah, Long Beach's neighborhood.
Oh yeah, Long Beach.
You're basically, is it the same area? I don't know LA very well. I try to avoid it as much as I can.
Everything is so huge over there. I used to live on Santa Fe Street over by Tommy's restaurant. It's everybody kind of knows Tommy's. It's a chain now, but there used to only be a few when I was growing up.
Okay.
Yeah.
That means nothing to me. Vosuario says, Vosuario is a subscriber from my Spanish channel. So he wrote it in Spanish. He says, oh, damn, I thought alive so early, but now I saw that it's your English channel. Everything good. Hello. I'll still leave you a like and I'll share as always.
Oh, thank you.
Hello. And he says hi. So thank you so much. Muchas gracias, Vosuario. Nos vemos a las 9:30 de todas maneras. And Rafa says, Vosuario is spamming.
Okay, and
wait, we have a lot more comments.
Oh, okay.
Rafa says, I do know what tortas are. And Rafa says, tamale. Oh, yeah. We also have a thing that's called a torta de tamal, which is essentially just bread with a tamal inside.
That thing was crazy because
That's just like dough on dough on dough. Different types of dough as well.
well, yeah, sometimes I go to the tamale stand in the morning to get a few tamales, and then I was waiting in line, and then they just cut open this huge bun, which is the sandwich buns they use here are huge.
like a
And
small
then they
baby.
threw a tamale inside, and I say, that's nothing but a bunch of different doughs put
Yes.
together.
But it is a thing. I think it might be mostly a Mexico City thing, but people
Yeah,
make
different
fun
regions
of us.
in Mexico have
Very different food.
Very different foods. And I will say this, there's a huge American influence coming down to Mexico now because hamburgers are becoming very popular.
On the like at street foods. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of taco stands are
That was
actually
new. That didn't happen when I lived here.
a lot of taco stands are now either turning to hamburger stands or they're adding another stand, which is the hamburger stand right next
Next
to
to the
them.
taco stand. Yeah. Bosuario says, okay, I don't know if I can. Okay. Says he likes huevos rancheros, divorciados, tacos, and the food around here is the best. And antojitos as well, it's all essentially just like some sort of either thick or thin tortilla with stuff on top or inside, but they all have a different name depending on the shape. I'm not going to list the shapes right now, but that's basically what I like. But yes, Bosuario, you're a friend. I'm trying to translate because they're all in Spanish. So I'm
And I
trying
will
to.
say before we get too far out from it, because I was saying I don't like how Catholicism follows the Pope so blindly. And I think that's why Orthodox Christianity right now is having a huge uptick in people going to the churches. The problem is there's not as many Orthodox churches as Catholic churches.
Or like any of the other branches of Christianity either in the States especially.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people that are thinking about going to church because we're
Some of the churches have been infiltrated.
a lot of the Protestant churches, especially in Canada, are just painted in these LGBTQ rainbow flags.
Yeah.
The one with the brown and black stripe, not just the regular rainbow.
Progress.
It's,
flag.
it's absolutely crazy. The government is trying to get rid of independent churches in Canada by taking away their tax exempt status. So, yeah.
And Rafa asks, Nat, has Guy already tried chiles en nogada?
Oh, what's that?
Le hizo cara. He made faces at them. It's that I liked and that I made you go to a restaurant just because they had them there
What was it?
when we went with friends. It's the chili that has stuff inside and
Oh,
a
yeah.
white cream on top.
Oh, I don't like white creams. Unless it's cheese.
Yeah, but you like Alfredo. You like
Yeah, it's because it's cheese. Alfredo is just cheese sauce.
okay. And Psychic says hello and nachos. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, nachos do translate, but I think those are mostly American. I mean, they got imported to Mexico as a dish, as a nacho dish from America.
Yeah, they don't really have nachos here, or at least
We have
not,
totopos.
not good nachos.
At
or-
the
and-
cinema, we do.
Well, yeah, but it's nacho. It's like
But,
fake cheese.
but at like pubs and bars, that's not a thing.
Yeah, I actually just make nachos here. I made some nachos last night because I crave nachos because it's like American Mexican food, and I really do like. And Mexicans are probably flipping their lid. I love American Mexican food, and nachos is one of those things.
And I do like chiles en nogada.
Yeah.
And I like all the like month or like season-based food, Mexican food, like pan de muerto, like dead bread, rosca de reyes, all of that I do like.
Like your pumpkin spice coffee as well.
That's it.
Seasonal.
But they did have that in Canada. Hold on. Sean says the far left and right seem to be collectivist in their outlook. Exactly. Hence the commonality. Trump needs to go after the federal judges. They need to be put in their place since they are out of control.
Yeah, Trump needs to be successful with this tariff project because everybody says we're in late stage capitalism and they're looking for a new system. This is going to become very dangerous. This is why I hope this tariff project is successful, and I'm going to support him all the way through because there's nobody really trying anything else with capitalism. And a lot of the wealth in capitalism is just going up to corporations, and there are very few family-owned businesses, especially when you look into Canada. The same thing is happening with America. Here in Mexico, there's a ton of street vendors, family-owned businesses, stuff like this. So their capitalism still does have two tiers to it here.
Although they now want to, Claudia Sheinbaum, our leftist communist president, wants to now regulate and tax street
They're trying
and
to.
dark black market.
They're trying to. We'll see how successful they are with the digital IDs. And this is why kind of the reason I'm so
just did it.
against this idea of the left and right coming together in this socialism experiment, because we have digital ID and digital currency. If you go towards that system with those technologies and the blockchain technology, it has a real chance to go awry. And if it starts to fail, rather than go back to capitalism, they're going to go full-fledged forward to communism, and they'll have the technological tools to do so. Just like 1984.
And Rafa says it was 12, not 13. But you put 3 little bars on it. Pope Pius the 12th then. Sorry.
I don't know all the popes, but
Me either.
but I do watch little documentaries about different popes,
Studied
and there
it,
have
but
been
I
some really
forgot.
good ones. So
Yeah, I forgot. I studied that. Sean says, Nat, you need to pronounce San Pedro right? It's pronounced San Pedro. Technically, it's pronounced San Pedro, but whatever.
yeah, I'm with San Pedro as well, because in the States or in California you have San Pedro, and that's what we always call it.
San Pedro
No, but in no
or
American.
San Pedro.
Yeah, no, San Pedro.
That's even weirder. That's even dumber.
That's what everybody calls it in LA.
And hold on. Lauren says peep. Don't know what it means. Sean says, gotta run. You guys are great. Have one wonderful Friday. Thank you. You
Thanks
too.
for
Have a
joining
great
us.
weekend. And if you're in the States, hopefully you had a great Thanksgiving as well.
Yeah.
Rafa says, you should meet the Society of St. Pius X. Now it's the 10th? Okay. Rafa says, you should meet the Society of St. Pius X guy. They're Catholics who disobey the Pope and dislike Vatican II.
Yeah, but that was my question. That was been our debate. I'm saying I like how a lot of Catholics aren't agreeing with the Pope, and you're saying that doesn't make
But
them.
then are they still Catholic?
How they still Catholic?
That's
And
the thing.
I say yes.
Because I mean that's
say
what
no.
happened initially when Protestantism, the Church of England, etc., the War of the Roses, all of that happened because people didn't want to. Well, the king didn't want to obey the Pope.
Well, that's what happened with the Eastern Orthodox
why
Church
don't they
as well.
just move towards Protestantism?
Well,
Because the thing is already there.
but it's different.
So, but do you stop being? I mean, and this is theological and religious, and I haven't seen or studied this in a long time. But would you, as a philosophical question, would you stop being Catholic then if you stop following the Pope?
A lot of people in the debate sphere were former Catholics that they had that same question, and a lot of them went towards Orthodoxy. So
But they still sort of reject the
no,
Pope.
Eastern Orthodoxy rejects the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
They've had a schism. So what we're kind of seeing with these last few popes is, I think, the base of the Catholic Church kind of wanting to have a schism, but another one.
Yeah, Tucker says, people leave a like. Thank you. Yes, please do leave a like. And Rafa says, done. And that's it. for
Okay,
now.
let's skip the next article. We'll go back to that one and then just go to
Are
the
we going to go
the
back
last
to the
one.
Nick Fuentes or no?
We are.
'Cause we didn't
They're all
finish it.
together.
Okay, well, then what are we going to?
The fourth article, this one. And I just kind of wanted to read this one
Okay, hold on.
because it kind of will maybe spark a discussion of putting guardrails on conservatism. And I think that's what they're currently trying to do right now.
From Clandestine, let's conduct a little experiment. I will stand with Trump, RFK Jr., Tulsi, Bondi, Cash, Bongino, etc. The woke right morons can stand with MTG, Massey, Candace, Owens, Ian Carroll, Tucker Carlson, Dave Smith, Nick Fuentes, etc. We will see who comes out on top.
Yeah, and there's people in the first list that are actually good, and there's people in the second list
In
that
your
are good,
opinion.
and there are even opinions with all these people I agree with and don't agree with. What they're trying to do here is create acceptable conservatism and put guardrails on conservatism by saying we're the establishment conservatism, and they're saying the second list isn't. I can look at the first list of Bondi, Cash Patel, and Dan Bongino. They're talking of getting rid of those three. If they do get rid of those three, all three of them are two of the three are going to go right back into podcasting and be added to the second list. And then they'll probably take a few others, try to say, oh, okay, let's see if this establishment conservative works. That's what they're trying to do right now. You can see it. They're doing this with Ben Shapiro and others. And on the second list, Thomas Massey is great. MTG was great on a lot of different things. Candace
Except
Owens.
when she had her feminism spaz out recently.
Yeah, but Dave Smith is actually a libertarian. So it's very interesting how they're trying to really say, they're really trying to create a new establishment of conservatism, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And I think it's in big flux. And you're seeing you're seeing a lot of establishment conservatives trying to say what's acceptable and not acceptable to talk about right now and bring censorship back into conservatism. And that's the wrong thing. I think that's what really held conservatism down for so long. And I also think modern populist conservatism has a lot to say thank you to libertarianism for, because they took all the best ideas from libertarianism, left the bad ones. And I think that's what really gave a huge populist push. And there's a huge fight actually going on in libertarianism right now between Dave Smith and Liquid Zulu and a lot of other people in the libertarian space that don't think Dave Smith's a libertarian anymore. They would consider him to be a conservative, but he's the biggest face of libertarianism right now.
But we also saw with, for example, with the guardrails that they're trying to set and actually going against what did work during the elections and what did work in establishing what MAGA and America First was with Trump, with Yes Bannon like behind him and being the architect of it, of bringing in more people, not excluding more people. And both sides, I don't just think it's the Ben Shapiro side, both sides are trying to exclude in different ways, but still trying to exclude the others that when they were together were working way better and way greater. And again, I think, unfortunately and sadly, Charlie Kirk was that glue and he got assassinated. And I think the fractures that were already being shown within the conservative party movement, whatever you want to call it, just exploded after that, especially with people jumping on the train and the conspiracy theories and the plots and etc.
I even think with Charlie Kirk, there was a lot of conservatives that had an issue with Charlie Kirk because he was constantly preaching more free speech, which I agree with. But a lot of conservatives, especially that came from the neocon branch that snuck into the kind of conservative populist movement, were always trying to put guardrails on. And Charlie Kirk was constantly kind of pushing back against that.
Mm-hmm. But again, and I think that's why, and it's important that someone else comes up and starts doing that. But what we're seeing come up more is the division, the people wanting to have their own little sides, and nobody really standing there and saying, well, why don't we actually just don't bring, again, everybody else in? And nobody has to agree with everybody 100%.
But I will say this is also why I do like Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens, because they open up what's acceptable discourse to a wide range. They open up the Overton window so you can really discuss anything rather than making it smaller and smaller of acceptable topics you can talk about. Like that's what Ben Shapiro's trying to do. That's like Mark Levine's trying to do. So yeah.
Levin, yes.
Yeah, Levin.
Rafa says, yes, they are, but they are in a conflicting state. It's complicated. I guess about the people, like the Catholics that want to go or that reject the current state of the Catholic Church. Rafa says, it's like when you know your boss is an idiot, but you still need to obey him on most things. So like they still have to obey the Pope on most things, but they know it's not the best.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's how I see it. But that's how these schisms in the past in the Catholic Church happened as well. Mm-hmm. So, and Orthodoxy does leave the door open that for individuals that really disagreed with the Pope to a great extent. It's something very close to Catholicism, but without having to have that allegiance to the Pope. Mm-hmm. At least that's how it looks to an outsider from.
But also with this whole Candace Owens and Nick and everybody fighting each other, etc., and especially the political pundits and the content creators and the political commentators that right now should be focusing on the damn midterms, which Trump apparently finally some gear kicked in. And this past few days, he has been starting to kind of say what the base wants to hear and trying to do what the base has been telling him for the past year. Now that the results in the economy are not being shown as fast as most people want them to, now the people that have to start talking about the policies and what can be done and what has been done, etc., to help with the midterms should start speaking about that and stop with the Israel derangement syndrome, Nick Fuentes derangement syndrome, the Candace insanity, etc. Like that, leave that behind because it's not helping anything.
You also have a lot of these content creators that were being censored, wondering if they would even have careers. Candace being banished from the Daily Wire, now all making a ton of money. I was watching an analysis of how much Nick Fuentes made just off of his podcast and then his super chats, $2.5 million. And that's he doesn't exactly say the amount. People have calculated it, but when you're making that amount of money, you're going to really kind of say what you want, and it's hard to censor the individual. Same with Candace. She's making a ton of money. Plus her husband has a ton of money. So yeah.
But Candace also has been, and she went against Trump, and she was telling people not to vote for Trump and etc. So she has clearly moved away from the movement, just like Nick Fuentes
But
has as well.
what I was going to kind of say is they all have a difference of opinions. They're making a ton of money, so they're not going to back down an inch. Within the Democratic Party, they'll straight up cancel you, and then that will be the end of your career. That's why you don't have people going head to head. I like the conservative model a lot more, and I do understand the disagreements, but it's getting to a point where, man, it could really affect the midterms. If it does, imagine if the Democrats get power in the midterms, they're definitely going to try to impeach Donald Trump. And then imagine if they carry that through to 2028, they're going to make up for lost time, and they're going to go balls to the wall. And the amount of authoritarianism that will be put on the American people will be absolutely crazy. They'll pack the court. They'll make Washington, D.C. its own state. They'll accept Puerto Rico's just so they won't lose further elections.
But that's the thing. Like we know, and through polls and statistics, we know that Republicans don't really vote out that much on midterms, and that Democrats do. So why aren't people concentrating on explaining and reminding people the importance of not losing the midterms as it's being projected now if they continue this stupid infighting?
Trump's realizing that the midterms are definitely in jeopardy, and he's realizing a year out, so he has time for course correction here, which would be great. That being said, it's not that Republicans don't come out midterms, is they don't come out when Trump's not on the ballot. So when Trump's on the ballot, they come out to vote for Trump, and then they just vote down ballot Republican. And that's how they were able to get that amount of power. Without Trump, I don't know how it's going to work, especially when you still have a lot of rhino conservatives within the movement currently trying to put guardrails on this, make this a corporatist party, a pro-war party again, which, yeah.
And unfortunately, I think because it's so monetizable, again, Candace is the #1 show, podcast, etc., across almost all platforms, and Nick is also getting amazing numbers.
Nick's starting
as well.
to break through to the mainstream now.
So of course they're not going to, at least these two and many others who kind of grift and glom onto them because of the insanity of both sides, and of all sides essentially, of this civil war within the conservatives. They'll continue with the gossip and the cheese man, the infighting, because that's what makes money and gets views, but that's not what's productive for the country.
But
the same thing's happening here in Mexico, and that's why it's so annoying to me.
Yeah, but you also have to realize they had to create a whole new ecosystem called alternative media, and alternative media.
But they're kind of breaking that system by themselves.
Yeah, but alternative media always had that level of cheese made to it, or that gossip to it, where the mainstream media doesn't. That being said, it's just part of the beast. So we're going to see independent media kind of re-evolve here.
Yes, but I hope it re-evolves into, once again, critical thinking, actually discussing things, and not just focusing on stupidity.
Yeah, but the issue is it's a lot of these globalist governments that are getting control over American media companies by adopting laws within their own country, like the EU, like the UK, like Canada, bringing censorship laws in, ID laws, digital ID laws, stuff like this. And if these American social media companies want to broadcast over there, they have to have a certain level of censorship that the government is kind of putting on them. Yes. Which is, I think it ultimately could affect censorship across the entire platform. This is what happened with video games recently. They wanted to censor certain things out of video games rather than the video game company creating two different products, one that was censored, one that wasn't censored. They just created one censored product, especially because everybody plays online, and it was impossible to make a system where everybody could play with each other and have two different versions of the game. Something similar might happen in social media. And that's why I've kind of been paying attention to what has been happening to the video game industry and censorship. One country like the UK bringing in legislation saying these things aren't acceptable in video games and they won't be sold in the UK is creating multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar video game companies to censor their entire games. What's happening to GTA is crazy right now as well.
But what I'm saying is, with specifically the alternative or independent media, news media, whatever you want to call it, because they're just focusing on this and not on important things like that, like the censorship, like what's happening elsewhere around the world, like what the US might come and do here in Mexico, and why that would be another war that you don't want to get involved in, or it's not such a good idea as a lot of people are making it seem. All of those topics and the I mean, the Muslim immigration and what's happening in Minnesota, what's happening in other states, what's happening
And
also with
Texas.
in Texas, what's happening with the immigrants, what's happening with the gas, with the economy. All of these things they used to talk about and they used to get into debates about this. Now it's all kind of shifted, unfortunately, to this ridiculous culture war thing, not culture war, internal civil war that they're having with each other. From gossip, like the assassination of Charlie Kirk
No, but
could
hold
have the assassination of Charlie Kirk could have been pedal forward and moving it forward and getting everybody to join together and actually follow more of the things that Charlie used to talk about and preach and give to the people and give to the younger people especially. Instead, it devolved into insanity,
No,
and people are just talking about that instead of focusing on
I'll disagree a little bit.
the U.S.
And I'll say why it makes sense why there might be infighting going on. There was two tiers of, there's this independent media that was created. Trump realized that, and he realized it helped win the election. He brought a lot of those independent voices into the White House and gave them direct connection to the administration. And what you've seen with those certain content creators, he gave a lot of access. They didn't want to talk bad about the administration, and Trump did started going in a corporate direction. He did a lot of good things as well, but a lot of the independent media didn't want to point that out. So rather than not point that out, they just didn't focus on Trump and focused on infighting. And I like Trump and I like what he's doing, but I constantly call him out when he does something wrong because I want to push him in the right direction. And I think it is working. I think he is getting the message because a lot of content creators are pushing him in that direction. But there's that second tier of independent media that just stopped calling him out.
But then would that or shouldn't that disqualify that tier of independent media that just wants to infight because they don't want to actually face reality or actually go against XYZ?
It's not that they just want to infight. It's just coming up because you're having different factions of the independent media. Some think Trump's doing a great job. Others are willing to actually point out when he does something wrong.
But why don't those two sides talk to each other?
They do talk.
They
do talk to each
but
other.
most of the anger that they're having is with each other. It's either IDS, Israel Derangement Syndrome, or it's either Candace Owens is crazy, or it's either Nick Fuentes is horrible, or Nick Fuentes shouldn't be platformed, or Nick Fuentes has a freedom of speech, which is kind of the camp that we're on, or I am on. So.
Israel did become a big issue, and it created this huge divide.
But it became too much of a big issue.
Yeah, no, but a lot of people don't realize it's not just about Israel. And the American First people will constantly claim it's just Israel, but it's not, because even if they stop funding to Israel and they stop fighting their endless wars for them, the America First is going to move on to the next country. It's going to be Egypt and Jordan. Egypt and Jordan both get almost $2 billion a year. So why are we now sending $2 billion a year to Egypt and Jordan? So
but that's what I mean. Like, why didn't the idea become, let's stop funding everybody instead of just focusing and driving it down into Israel, because that's where they start losing people and where they start losing the whole debate and discussion about funding other countries.
Well, I think America First wanted to win one big battle, and then after they could cut off Israel,
but they've only focused on that one battle. That's the problem.
Then they could cut off other countries after that.
Yes, but again, it's just devolved into insane Candace Owens conspiracy theories.
Well, I don't think it's insane, and I like Candace Owens, so we disagree on that. So, like, even me and you, we have a show together, and we disagree.
But that's what I always say. People, you should disagree with the people you watch and the people you get information from and the people you listen to their opinions. You shouldn't be in agreement with every single thing somebody says, because you're not using your
but
brain
we're
then.
just seeing that happen on a larger scale with the independent.
But then
media.
you don't have to hate the person. You don't want to have them deplatformed. You shouldn't want to, like, all of that is also what's getting from this. I hate the word polarization, but from the polarization that has happened within the conservative.
No, because you just look at Nick Fuentes, for instance. Him and Tucker absolutely hated each other. One was calling the one kid a gay guy in his basement. The other one is calling him a CIA operative. They got together. They did come together. But now you're seeing that split again because they're having a difference of opinion. And they're trying to sell what their vision of conservatism is.
That's the problem. Everybody's trying to sell. Nobody's actually interested in having productive conversations, productive ways to move forward. But you actually hit the nail on the head. No. It is that a lot of them are just trying to either sell their perspective that everybody should follow, sell their merch or whatever they're selling, or sell or get views, which is essentially kind of selling as well.
Well, yeah, because they were in the independent media space, they need to survive. The problem is...
Yes, but all of them are very good. Pretty well off now. They don't need to survive, just survive.
They are good now, but yeah.
But again, now that you're at that level, now that you got all those eyeballs, use it to actually move the country towards the place you've been claiming you wanted to be in.
And they're trying to do that, but they all have different visions. Tucker has a different vision than Candace that does Donald Trump.
But then
they
don't
all
wanna talk
have
to
three
each
different visions there. Nick definitely has a socialist vision. Trump has this tariff capitalist vision, which I want to actually see play out more than any other vision. But the problem is, as he goes for that vision, he has to become more of a corporatist in order to restructure capitalism. Then you see Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. I think their visions are very similar to each other, but a lot of people can't it's harder to discount Tucker Carlson because he's very aware not to go down so many conspiracy rabbit holes.
No.
And they're going after Candace because they're trying to discredit Tucker and Candace. It's just different competing visions for conservatism and the country that are competing with each other.
Yes, but while they're competing, number one, the Democrats might be getting ideas or might be now being fully taken over by the progressive side of them and the progressive crazy wing of the Democrat Party, again, Nancy Pelosi already left. I don't know if most people will accept Gavin Newsom coming in as a kind of new...
But there's not
they don't air.
There's no unifying principle. Before it was freedom of speech because of the amount of censorship that was going on. That was the unifying principle. They all wanted to fight for that one thing. Why? Because it not only gave them all a voice, it gave them a chance to actually make a living and survive on top of that. So their economic and their political survival depended on freedom of speech and getting rid of censorship. And because they're now in power, there is very little censorship in the United States, but in other places in the world, there's a ton of censorship.
Yes.
That being said, there's no unifying factor that all these American content creators are kind of coming together.
Or even the political figures and the actual politicians.
So what I'm asking you is, what's that unifying?
It should be America first. But they haven't been able to define what America first even means anymore. So.
No, they have defined it fairly well. But Ben Shapiro is not America first. He says he is. There's different competing visions for America first.
Again, with the Israel.
That's the thing.
But yes, but the way you should go against Ben Shapiro, for example, it shouldn't just be we have to stop funding Israel. It's we have to stop all external funding.
The way you want to go against him is to debate. The problem is he won't debate.
He won't debate.
He'll only debate college
he wants
kids.
To censor people.
He only debate college kids, and that was always the knock on Ben Shapiro.
But at the same time,
I never really bought into it until actual people try to debate him, and he's refusing to have these debates. Although he was willing to try to debate Hassan Piker on ABC, Hassan turned it down. But
yes, because he wanted to talk about again the Israel thing. It's like we're going around in circles because everybody else is going around in circles. But even with that, I mean, compare Ben's numbers to Candace's numbers, audience-wise and probably monetary as well, and Nick as well. Compare them to Ben. Ben is not doing so well. The Daily Wire itself is not doing so well. So comparatively, when Candace says, I'm getting censored, it's not actually true. She's the biggest. I feel like they're pushing both her and kind of Nick as well. Not YouTube, obviously, but they're both getting pushed because maybe your theory is right. Maybe they are an asset to the government or some government.
But Ben Shapiro still has the biggest subscriber base number. The problem is...
No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
Candace has way more. In total-wise, Candace has a lot more.
Let's see.
If anybody in the chat wants to check it, please tell me. Because I don't want to be on the computer typing, but I'm pretty sure Candace's numbers are way higher.
Okay, we're going to see right now. Ben has 7...
Not on YouTube. You have to count all platforms.
No, I'm just going to count YouTube right now. Because that's the one we're on. He has 7 million followers, which is huge. He's one of the biggest. But I think a lot of those followers are.
So I don't want to look it up here because then audio will start.
No, she only has 5.5 million followers. Well, so what?
But then you
hold on. Let me finish. So what I'm saying is Ben Shapiro actually has a bigger subscriber base, but I don't think it. Hold on. I don't think it's an authentic subscriber base because if you actually look at his numbers for his daily views or even his comment section. A lot of it doesn't look authentic.
Yeah, that don't watch him. That's what I was saying. With Candace, she does have those viewership numbers way up, and again, dominating all the charts of podcasts and etc.
Well, and also Ben Shapiro.
Because I'm still subscribed to Ben Shapiro. I don't watch him.
Ben Shapiro also came from the Daily Wire, and there was a lot of accusations of the Daily Wire possibly buying view counts, subscriber counts in order.
They all do
in
that.
order to have a snowball effect.
They all do that.
Okay, I don't think Nick did. Nick was the one that didn't have to do it for a long time because he was so
he had
banished.
no platform. So
he had.
Where was he going to buy?
He had Cozy TV.
Yes,
and that was.
But I mean, he did get financed and funded through fans as well.
The fact that he survived, even managed to survive for as long as he did, is astonishing. And
Again, he's good at what he does. He's good at talking and the way he formulates points, and especially the way he formulates clippable moments, which is in today's social media economy what gets you those
hold
eyeballs.
on, there's one other I want to check. Oh, we made it to 580. That's our
Oh,
subscriber
thank you so
base.
much for whoever did subscribe. You're helping us be 100% organic.
We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers so we
Being
can get monetized.
100% organic. Rafa says, be careful, guy. Nat could be being paid by the Mossad. I wish somebody was paying me.
Yeah,
No, I don't. I would never accept it, but I mean, you can tell we're not being paid by anybody.
No. Okay, and
Not even.
and you can tell because there's no real loyalty when Trump starts going the wrong direction. I do call it out, not because I don't like him, but because I do like him and I want to push him in the right direction. And when I disagree with Nick Fuentes, I call it out. Candace Owens, I say what I agree and disagree with her on. But a lot of people have certain loyalties that help their brand.
And the whole thing we started our original channel, which is now our Spanish channel, when we were in Canada, when it was during the bad times of 2020, the
trucker
jibby jab,
protest.
the trucker convoy over there in Canada. We went to film, we went to kind of interview some people. Those were the first videos ever uploaded. And kind of from there onwards, we both said like the goal eventually would be to maybe make documentaries, but all funded not through having to search for that funding, but through the people that actually want to watch it. And that has kind of also, other than free speech, has also kind of been a principle of, what we want to do. We don't want to be we don't want to have to self-censor because we did have to do that a lot when we were in Canada.
Yeah, but you're thinking a little bit
Just as
too far
human
ahead.
beings.
You're saying that, the goal was to do this. But when we first started, we literally just went to the trucker
Well,
protest.
yes, of course.
We were too scared to even.
Yeah, we didn't know what we were
We
gonna
were
do.
too scared to even be on camera, so we just filmed the protest and then we did a voiceover, which took forever to do because we kept re-recording. We were petrified to be on camera. The first thing was just to not leave Canada. I wanted to try to save the country, and I thought even if we're a small voice, if other small voices, and a lot of people were coming out to these trucker protests and other thing, and I was just hoping a lot of people would speak up and try to save the country, and the country just
Didn't.
Well, we got an article later on about how they're actually doing mind control programs in Canada, and the data is now being
Mind
released.
control programming, but yes.
It's $1 billion mind control
But
program
it's not
Canada
called,
has.
it's not mind control.
It's exactly
It's
what
manufactured consent. It's different, and it's actually a proper term. But
that being said, there was a point that I didn't trust the Canadian people to vote for their own self-preservation.
Yes.
The elites had completely taken over that country. They had all the mechanisms of control, and there was becoming less and less freedom, and they're still headed in that direction to this day. So I'm glad we left for Mexico.
But Mexico's
Not
now doing that tiny experiment as well. They're 10 years behind, but it's not like they're not trying with the socialist government we currently have.
Yeah, but you get
the actual national socialist government we have. If there's a whole examination.
But you actually get chaos through freedom through chaos here because the government is just not well to put together. They might have a digital ID here, but you print it out off your computer
And
you
laminate it.
laminate it yourself, and nobody's actually going to require you to have it. So
I mean, for official things, they might. But again, they have no mechanism to actually control that. The problem with Canada is that they do. And there is an ability here. They have the ideas, and the people are still willing, as we saw a few weeks ago, the people are still willing to call out the government because in Mexico, luckily, we have an inherent distrust of government because of how we've been treated forever since the independence.
okay, let's go.
Hold
into-
on, we have some comments.
Oh, we do. Okay.
Psychic says, I thought it was putting Americans before other nations with our tax dollars. America first. It's supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, and this is what I say. Like
That was the original idea.
if somebody watches the show, I'm constantly saying America first. But what I mean by America first is Canadians need to put Canada first. America needs to put America first. Mexico first, and build a strong internal economy. So even if their external economy or the global economy goes bad, the country will still be good. The quality of life for the citizens will be good, and not for the elites and for the government. I don't care about the nation's GDP. I care about the GDP of each individual within the country and having a good life. And I think when you make a country strong like that, when you say Mexico comes together with the United States and they're both strong to begin with, and they don't completely rely on each other, you have a stronger partnership. Yeah.
Hopefully they'll understand that in all the countries. But Psychic also says, I follow this channel to receive understanding. Well, and as I say in my Spanish channel, I know less than more. And I'm always saying that, like, don't fully go check other sources, go figure out if the information I'm saying is correct. Don't take everything I say with like 100% certainty. I'm just giving my opinions. I don't call myself a journalist. I'm just giving my opinion online. And I think a lot of people have to start doing that more instead of having people follow them blindly 100%, because then you get a bunch of people that have also lost critical thinking skills. That is kind of what started the whole independent media movement in the first place.
Well, and also people just need to speak out, whether it's with their friend groups or make small podcasts like this, or even be active in the comments with your opinions. Otherwise, we see the government get more and more and more control. We're seeing this happen all over the EU and Canada right now.
And here.
Yeah.
They're trying here. Rafa says, don't forget Israel has been funded by the US for several years, but also openly has lobbyist associations negotiating with politicians, and it's the only country being protected against boycotts. That's why it's so important to defend them, for them to defend them.
And there's no perfect system, but with this digital ID, this blockchain technology, this digital currency that's coming in, it shouldn't be implemented against the citizens. It needs to be implemented against the government. And if you decide to have if you decided actively try to be a politician or even part of a board on a corporation, I would be in favor of radical transparency through digital ID, blockchain technology, so we know where every single dollar is going. It's open source so the people can dig into it, and then there can be repercussions for the government, not the citizenry. We need to maximize freedom for the citizens while actually having authoritarian control over the government itself.
But what do you think of what Rafa said about Israel and defunding them?
Yeah, I think Israel needs to be defunded.
Because it has those lobbyist associations that also work within the political system in the US.
It's not just about defunding Israel. It's about you need to stop the lobbyist overall, but they're going to find another mechanism. That's why you have to have these core foundations of putting your own country first and your own citizens first, because even countries that want to put their country first, if you have this global mentality, it's all about GDP and the country doing good at the cost of the citizens. So what really makes
and by importing people from all over the world that are cheaper, so GDP can grow.
Yeah, it's your citizenry and that quality of life that matters. And I don't necessarily think you need to have the greatest GDP in order to have a great internal economy that provides a good quality of life for your citizens. Mm-hmm. And I think as we see the world population begin to shrink because people are having less children, and that seems inevitable at this point. I wish it was different, but I think we're going to have to come up with new economic models on how can we provide a quality of life for the citizen.
And the only way you do that is by getting the career politicians that are not interested in the citizens, that they're not they don't serve the public, they serve themselves in their own interest. Those are the ones that actually have to go. And I do think there is a problem almost everywhere, because I see it a lot here in Mexico too, with career politicians that are there just for their self-interest.
Well, and I think as we go on over the next 10 or even 20 years, I think a lot more people in the YouTube space or social media space that have shows kind of like this will eventually get into politics, because people know those people very well. They know their basic foundation. They can ask questions, things like this. We've seen, I have a clip of him later. In Canada, he used to run True North. Andrew Lawton. He went from social media into the political space within Canada. Yeah. It's also happened in Europe a couple times.
Yeah, he was good.
But even if you disagree with the politician, they have to justify themselves every day on their show, not to push their necessarily political agenda, but what are their founding principles that actually guide them as a politician, so they don't just shift with the wind and the polls.
Yes.
So I think as time goes on, people within the political social media space will cross over to politics more and more.
And I mean, they might have to, because of the incoming wave of what YouTube might do, how YouTube might change, AI, slop, etc.
Yeah.
So, and Psychic says, for sure, I agree. It's just y'all have school and we adapt, because without voices like yours, society would have fallen apart long time ago. Appreciate you all, for real. Thank you so much.
Yeah, but
I kind of have school. I'm always saying, like, you don't need a degree. I think the college and university system both all over the world, essentially, is completely broken and captured. And I would incentivize more people to just study for yourselves now that there is that opportunity. I studied philosophy and political science, but I didn't really do much with that. Worked in the film industry, have had a lot of different jobs, have had to struggle and not struggle. But I would say if you're interested in something, now the good thing about the internet and communication is that you have the ability to fully go into it.
Yeah, but I would also,
And to do this, I should have an opinion. I don't think you have to have school or university or a degree or anything like that.
and I'm just happy as of right now, there is a space to actually voice my opinion. I understand that might not always be the case. And especially if Trump gets out of office, the EU, Canada, Australia, all these countries are bringing in mass censorship as we speak. And they're forcing these social media platforms within those regions to to maintain that kind of censorship. If that comes to Mexico and even the United
That's
States,
already coming.
if it's actually fully implemented like the EU implements it, there you go. There will be no more people that have dissenting voices. If you want to continue to do shows like this, you're either going to have opinions that don't piss off the government, or you're not going to have a show. And my answer is, okay, then we don't have a show. That's why fighting for freedom of speech is so damn important. And so many countries around the world, Western countries that claim freedom of speech, are actually debanking rival political factions, trying to say what's acceptable speech within the EU and other regions.
And passing laws to censor social media and dissent, especially.
Yeah. Okay.
And this dissent online is now what has become also the checks and balances upon governmental power and governmental authority, which are important. Even if they're wrong, having those dissenting opinions, having those opinions at all, is what makes what they all love to always complain about an actual democracy, especially when the media, traditional media, and journalists have completely forgotten what their job is.
Well, and I think they really don't like dissenting opinions, and they'll bring censorship on that level, because the actual thing they don't like is not the dissenting opinions as much as they don't like sleuth journalists and YouTubers and investigators going into these money trails. We're seeing what's happening in Ukraine. People are investigating that in real time, where how money's just disappearing, billions of dollars. They're going into different political parties, even political parties that they favor, and saying, well, no, this isn't acceptable. How are these billions of dollars actually disappearing? It's making it a lot harder for politicians to accept lobbyist money, other things like this. So what they don't like is not being able to be corrupt. But they can't say that. What they can say is, well, this is not acceptable opinion. It's creating dissent in society. So they can try to kill two birds with one stone.
And not being able to control that dissent and manage that dissent.
Okay, let's go back into...
Do you want to see the last Nick
clip?
Fuentes video?
Yeah.
Because we're almost done with the show and we haven't moved an inch.
And this one was a little bit older, but this is what kind of sparked the dissent between Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes. They don't get along because Candace Owens had Nick Fuentes on her podcast and just ambushed him with a bunch of questions.
Well, he says he ambushed.
I watched it. She did.
From Ether Wave, Nick Fuentes goes off on Candace Owens. And sorry, there will be swearing, apparently.
Yeah, there is swearing on this clip.
Swearing. Sorry, YouTube.
Her totally unimpressive. I watch her shows. It's totally unimpressive. And she's cute. She's good looking. She's put together. You know, as women are. Women are good at being Barbie dolls, you know. And they all want to be Oprah. Brett Cooper, Candace Owens, they all just want to be Oprah. They don't care about this shit. That's all nonsense. They don't care about this stuff. They all want to do a talk show. So she want to do a Barbara Walters, tough interview. Okay. Well, you got what you wanted. So anyway, so that was our collaboration. That was my thoughts on it. The response from almost everybody said the same thing. They said she was emotional. She was triggered about race. She was being almost deliberately obtuse, that it was tedious getting into the screenshots, the drama. And above all else, put some respect on my name. And I hit the nail on my head at the end. I kind of went off. And I said, look, I was 17. What's your excuse? You know, you got married later than me. You got red-pilled later than me. You became a truth teller later than me. And you haven't gone through a fraction of what I've gone through. And she wants to call me out. That's what she texted me. She goes, I'm calling you out. And my response to that is, bitch, you have no right to call me out. And maybe it's time for you as a woman to sit down and shut the fuck up. That's me, a man. You want to say, make me a sandwich? Okay. This is me, a man, telling you, a woman, to sit down and shut the fuck up before you call out anybody else. Sit down and shut the fuck up. bitch. I'm so
Okay, we can leave it
Because I'm sure
there.
it's going to continue on. But also, we spoke about this, when was it? Wednesday.
And that's why I like Nick Fuentes, I'll tell you.
And I mean, he says things that most guys are too afraid and too unmanly to actually say, at least on a platform. But say we had the same discussion with
Well, he also stands up
Megyn
to Candace.
Kelly.
Nobody stands up to Candace. They're scared of her.
No, people do.
And I like Candace.
More
but
people have been lately, at least, with her insanity plot that she's been going down.
recently now, but even then they're very scared. The fact that
I don't know if I call it scared, but
okay, what were you gonna
But
say?
I was going to say, like, we spoke about this and women in politics and etc. And I have a very unpopular opinion that women shouldn't get to, high levels of politics because we just don't work up
And
there.
being you disagree with that?
Yeah.
I don't mind women being into politics.
It's not that I might. I just think that it doesn't work when they're at the highest level
Well,
because of the priorities
there's
that
a
they
ton
have.
of corrupt politicians like Kaya Kallas in the EU, but then there's Daniel Smith in Alberta, and there's plenty of male politicians that are corrupt as well.
No, not for corruption, for how they govern.
But I will say this: I've come
how
around.
we govern.
I've come around on voting. Not to say that women shouldn't vote, but it should be one vote per family. So if you're single, you shouldn't maybe not even get a vote, or maybe there can be exceptions in that. But when people have a family, they're motivated to vote for intergenerational success. They're thinking about the future, not only of their family because of their kids, but the country's direction overall.
I do think there should be some component of service to the country before you can vote, or giving something to the country. I think
Starship Troopers there. Service equals, oh God, I forgot the quote there.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Starship Troopers is a show where you have to serve in order to get a vote in society.
Before my time. But I mean, there should be some sort of, also a lot of citizens forget that we have a responsibility as well to the country, and we have a responsibility of being informed, of voting properly. And that is why we see what we see in the societies we have nowadays, because that responsibility has essentially been taken away because also of the government, daddy government, because it's become mommy or daddy government.
Yeah, but it's nice to see, and especially in America, this.
But I was saying something with that, and then you went off somewhere else. I was
Go
saying
ahead.
with Marjorie Taylor Greene and with Megyn Kelly and with kind of Candace as well, and the way that eventually most women that are in politics or commentary, etc., they kind of do sway away from their principles as soon as they're being attacked. And they go towards the feminist route of don't insult me, don't do this, don't do that. I mean, some men do it.
Yeah,
too.
I mean,
Nick has done that.
The
too.
one I think one of the biggest problems is actually feminism, and that
Yeah.
issue needs to be addressed. The
That's all I
problem
talk about.
is, I don't know how I don't know how it's gonna be addressed. We'll see it's kind of being addressed now within
Well, you have to show
social media spaces and stuff like that. But
and by showing women are the error of our ways and why it can never work. The model that we have been sold for so long can never actually work or be implemented. And when it has, it has just made us a lot more miserable.
it sold
And
a
it has left us
generation of
childless,
women
widows,
live.
sad childless widows with careers.
Yeah, but it's not. And I don't think women
Husband
should be in the workplace. I don't mind that. You might have a different idea than me. I don't know. But what I am saying is women need to prioritize having kids at a young age and career maybe later on. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think that would fix a lot of
priorities.
I think that would fix a lot of the problems. But the fact that we have this model that everybody should go to college right after high school, and that's the way it should be. Well, women should really prioritize maybe a family at that point.
But men should also prioritize learning things before they even know if they have to or want to go to college or if it's going to be useful for them. Not everybody should go to a college, period.
No.
And during that initial period where they're both either she's becoming a mother, he's starting to learn how to do things, be it trades, whatever, that's when starting a family would be ideal. And then you can worry about more
and
things.
then
And
you
yes,
can-
money, etc. But with trades,
It's a much
not
better,
so much
it's
money,
a
but
much
you can
better
make a lot
model
of money.
it's a much better model for women as well, because they can go to school part-time, and then once their kids are out of the house, that's a great time to start a career, and then you've already fulfilled the obligation of having a family to not only yourself but to society and your husband and everything else.
And we are seeing population collapse all over the world. Here in Mexico is one of the worst. Mexico City is one of the worst cities in the world for population collapse.
Yeah, you did a video on that, and I actually had no clue. The United Nations was completely fudging the numbers on not only Mexico, but Latin America in general, saying they had a much higher birth rate than they did. Those numbers were a complete lie. They even came out and said in an email that they didn't want to cause panic, which is crazy. And they're still giving these false numbers out, though.
Yeah. And Latin America is still seen as, they have too many babies and too many people there. So now they're coming up to the US. But actually, we're losing more and more people, both that leave the country, but also that are not being born.
Yeah.
And that are being unalived by criminal gangs and organizations. Psychic says, lol, Fuentes competing with a career mother.
Yeah, and that is like Fuentes is that's the one big dig on him is, well, you talk all this family and society, and you don't even have a girlfriend, let alone a wife, and then let alone a child. And then when he's asked about it, oh, he's interested. He just can't find anybody. He might be gay.
Yes,
I don't know.
Because he's looking for somebody with different, parts.
That was the dig with that Tucker kept saying. Now I don't actually think he's gay, but Manny, what's the issue?
I mean, I'm sure some girls at least would throw themselves
he
at
makes
him.
$2.5 million a year. I'm sure he can find a girlfriend.
But at the same time, not to defend him or anything, but because he makes that much money at that young age, you start getting less trusting of people because they could just be there for their own interests. But
and if he had known somebody,
it'd be funny if he comes to Mexico and finds a Mexican girl and just marries her.
Well, his last name is Fuentes.
He's like a quarter Mexican.
Yeah, he's a quarter Mexican.
Yeah, it's always been incredibly funny to me that his last name is Fuentes, but he doesn't seem to fully realize.
I didn't put two and two together, and then somebody asked him about it, and then I was like, oh yeah. Somebody asked him about Mexican people, and he's like, oh, I love Mexican people.
It's a Hispanic name. Sean says, before my time, Starship Troopers is a classic movie. It's the Citizen Kane of Gen X.
Yeah.
Before my time, too.
It was based upon a book, and then I think they may make a new one, so hopefully they do. It was a good movie.
I think I heard a rumor maybe, but Sean also says U.S. doesn't fund Israel. It gives military aid to make sure the military-industrial complex gets paid. And that too, it is a giant laundry machine for the U.S. to fund all these other countries, all these other wars, and that is why it's so unpopular to move away from it. Not just because they want to be so gracious and so helping of Israel, but because a lot of people would lose and their investments would go haywire, and the laundry machine would break if they stop it. But they can't come out and say that. So.
It's not just about laundering money. It's about one of the big problems with the United States is the military-industrial complex. Yeah. It's the biggest in the world, and it's nice if they would focus on their own national defense. That being said, if they did that, even with this Golden Dome project, which is potentially going to cost $1 trillion, I don't think they would bring in enough money, because they're bringing tons of money from the EU, tons of money from Canada, every nation on earth. Mm-hmm. And it makes you question, are wars being started just to fund the military industrial complex? I would like to see, and that's another part of the America First movement, is anti-war, no war, make the military industrial complex a lot smaller.
But that is also, I think, a very maybe even taboo subject amongst America First, because a lot of people are very proud of the military and have been kind of raised and taught to be very proud of the military.
I don't think it is at all.
Not anymore, but it has been almost the backbone of Americana and patriotism.
You can be pro-military without saying I'm pro-military industrial complex.
No, but it has been mixed, and I think that might be why a lot of people are not putting it in that context, but they're putting it in just defund Israel without actually explaining what it all means.
The issue is a lot of the neocons have smuggled their way into this populist conservative modern movement, and they're trying to bring back, they want to make sure this military industrial complex never falls.
Mm-hmm. And that benefits both sides.
Yeah, and defunding Israel would be a great start, and I do understand they would stop giving money to a lot of these countries, but a lot of these countries they give money to, these countries just give it right back in order to buy military arms, and that's put in the contracts. So you need to stop funding all these countries. But if you stop funding them, then you're going to stop funding your own military industrial complex. And there's neocons on both the left and the right that don't want to see that happen.
And it's mostly the career politicians that have, over time, gained more and more interest and more dependency upon upon being in those positions or jobs. Rafa says, unpopular opinion, most women are not made for the workforce. They tend to cry and generate toxicity. I mean, it's not unpopular here. I completely agree. I am a woman. I have been in the workforce. And I really do think most women, at least, have their priorities completely wrong and have had their priorities twisted through the propaganda and the narrative, and are now not even able to see themselves elsewhere or see different goals, but they deep down understand that that it's not
First of all,
helping them.
First of all, they can't do a large portion of the jobs. They're just too physical. Yeah, you might have one or two or a very small percentage of women that can do those physical jobs, but that's not going to actually fill the ranks that you need. That's number one. And then number two, they say, well, we can do this job, and this job. And those are the most coveted jobs that even men really want to work their whole life. And women said, oh, we should be able to cut the line and have 50% women in the executive boardroom.
Mm-hmm. But also we saw, and when women entered the workforce en masse, basically, we did see emergence and a surge of like human resources positions, things that women could do that have also intensified the toxicity of workplaces that didn't used to be there.
Well, and women in corporations are going to
because they had to give something to do for the women.
Women in corporations are going to do the same thing they did in countries when they got the vote, and that is they're always going to vote for security rather than freedoms, and then you have an authoritarian police state. And it happens in corporations too, because human resources just keeps growing, and what's acceptable behavior and non-acceptable behavior becomes narrower and narrower and narrower. And then when say somebody wants to say, well, okay, well, I don't want all this drama of possible sexual harassment in the workplace or this or that. Somebody that might own their own private business, so they want to hire maybe all men. That's not acceptable. That's discrimination. And I thought it was his own private business. He should be able to do what he wants.
But I was going, the whole concept of misplaced motherhood. Like, yes, that authoritarian police state that comes with demanding security and safety, both by women to the government, but also by women within the government. And we're seeing that in Mexico with Claudia Sheinbaum. That is misplaced motherhood, because that same level of safety and authoritarianism in a way, when it's at home and towards children and for educating and used for like an actual purpose where you're guiding your own children through the barriers and what's acceptable, what's not, and you becoming that force to guide them through life and not just let them go run wild, and then have those delineated borders for them and that discipline for them, that is useful in the home and in the house or in small communities, but it's not useful when you're trying to apply it to grown-ass men and other women.
Well, the reason it doesn't work on a societal level, but it works at home, because eventually the child grows up and he gets actual freedom, and he keeps some of those principles and he puts guardrails on himself, but he also goes towards freedom. If you put this into a society, there's never that point where you break free. It's always going to be on there, those barriers in that security state. Yes.
Yeah. And Sean says, paying aid to Israel is more to do with making sure corporations like Boeing and Raytheon are fat and happy. It's a problem. Yeah, exactly. In the military industrial complex.
Yeah, and as American style capitalism matures more and more, you're seeing family-owned businesses are absolutely disappearing. Big corporations, all the money starting to consolidate there. If it continues to the next level, you're going to see these corporations, and you're already seeing it, they're more powerful than governments. So then people are saying, well, at least with state capitalism, the money can be redispersed, but there has to be another option. And potentially what Trump's doing with the tariffs might work, but there has to be a way to, like, capitalism is just going to consolidate wealth until there's only corporations left. And then once those corporations are left, those corporations are going to start consolidating.
But also the way that was allowed to happen was with the credit system and the debt system that is now eating the US and Americans alive. And now it's coming over here to Mexico as well and eating us alive too. Because that is, in part, I'm not an economist, I'm not fully sure how it all works, but in part I do know it is because of that credit debt system that allowed Americans to have more fake money, quote unquote. I mean, it's not actually their money. They're not buying things outright. They're buying everything with debt. But that meant that the companies could bloat themselves up and become bigger and bigger and bigger, and also receive debt, like be able to receive credit and debt themselves.
Yeah.
I think the big problem with capitalism right now, as we're seeing it, that a lot of people don't want to admit as well, because debt and credit cards in the end are useful for individuals, and they don't want to give it up, and they don't want to buy things outright because a lot of people can't, is admitting that credit cards and debt are a massive problem, and what has kind of not fully made the capitalism everybody's complaining about now not work as it was working before.
Well, and I think
There's a million other elements to it.
well, and I think in come the 2028 election, there's going to be a lot of talk on what's working, what's not working, and capitalism is really in the crosshairs. It doesn't mean it needs to be rid of. It just needs to be fixed. But bringing more authoritarianism into it, I don't think is the right answer. Or bringing a mass shift of socialism, especially when you have digital ID and digital
Yes.
currency.
And that combination is, I would say, deadly.
Yeah.
Psychic says it's a never-ending cycle, and the mortgages and the loans, exactly. Like, that's what I mean by like the credit, debt, like anything that has to do with credit, debt, financing, etc., has turned capitalism into a trap, I would say.
Well, and like
That it wasn't before, when you bought things outright.
you should be putting your citizens first. And when you're putting your citizens first and worried about their quality of life, house prices should be made as cheap as possible. Land prices have been made a commodity. They're like the foreigners come into countries, buy massive amounts of property, whether that's foreign corporations or foreigners themselves. Property should be reserved for citizens, and even corporations should only be able to buy a certain amount of property, not like Bill Gates buying up the most farmland in the United States.
And China.
If property ownership's reserved for only citizens and the government releases massive amounts of land, property is actually almost worthless. And it should be very cheap, because that's one of the basic necessities your population needs. The next thing is food. Food should be grown internally, and it should be maybe even subsidized by the government to a point to make sure housing and food are very, very cheap. And then that builds a base. The problem is governments don't want that, because if you had very cheap food and you own your own property, well, you're free now. And
You're
they
no
have
longer
they have
dependent.
little control over you to force you into the workplace and do jobs you actually don't want to do.
And hold on. Sean says, when those dudes robbed the Louvre a month or two ago, the reason they were able to do it is because the Louvre had a woman security force and got scared when the robbers showed their power tools to them.
Yeah. I used to work security for a long time, and women don't belong on there. But I
Nope.
will say I used to work for the Teamsters as set security for movies. And there's no women on there, but they need a quota of women, and very few women apply. So I told Nat, I was like, oh, you need to apply for that. And of course, they hired her right in with no experience.
And to move on up from there to other
Yeah.
industry jobs, but that is like an entry point. But then you also work security at other places within Vancouver, and also just seeing and walking into. I remember there was a London Drugs we used to go to. It was when the worst part of town by Gastown, if you've ever been to Vancouver, and they had all tiny Indian female security guards that were terrified, and the guys were crazy, yelling, spazzing out, ODing, etc. And they would just stand there terrified because they can't handle it.
Yeah,
all
but that's what the
by themselves.
corporations want now, and that's what the government wants. Because I had done security. I always had 2 or 3 jobs, so that was always one of my jobs. When I first started, you would actually do something. By the time I finished doing security, if you did anything, if you actually put your hands on anybody for any reason, you would lose your job. They made that perfectly clear. You had to stand there. If they wanted to commit a crime or take something, all you could do is call the police, and the police had to handle it. Well,
And the police then doesn't handle it.
well, the criminal's gone by the time it's done, and then you just give the police the video and you make a report. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, you're there for insurance more than anything.
Yeah, even on the movie sets, when you're guarding millions of dollars of equipment, they tell you if somebody wants to take something, you have to let them take it. They don't want to have an incident where you put your hands on anybody for any reason.
Yeah, I mean, it is understandable, that liability, because cops have a lot more leeway when dealing with that than
Whatever.
regular citizens. But it was ridiculous, and it did change. It did shift kind of, because I do remember, and I went to Vancouver recently in September. Again, I saw even more females doing jobs that they just shouldn't be doing, and especially immigrant females, and especially Indian girls.
They literally couldn't speak English
No.
to tell somebody to stop doing something. It
Yes.
was crazy. But I will say, if anybody is trying to, I don't know, the movie industry is really going through a hard time right now.
especially in
But a
Vancouver.
good way in used to be through security, and then you can transfer departments to the grip department or lighting department. You would make good connections on sets.
And it gives you set hours, which
Yeah.
you need to apply to other unions.
It was a very
Or
it's a
to
very
training
good,
programs.
It's a very good way to get into the movie industry, like a non-traditional, like don't go to film school. It's the
Yeah.
wrong way. Actually, you'll make a ton of money if you do security on sets, and then you can transfer to different divisions.
And you already have your set hours. You already know a lot of the crew, the location scouts, etc. So location people. Hold on. Sean says we had 0% interest rates for far too long. Maybe a gold standard needs to be brought back. And we're always saying
Hold
that.
on. Yeah, I wanted to talk about
yeah.
that today. Huge,
So you're
because I
talking-
woke up this
he knows
morning
about it, I don't.
and I was shocked. The silver market was frozen, and they said it was because of their data center went down. They actually have one of the most extensive data centers with more than triple backups. So it's almost impossible for these data centers to go down. Silver is starting to transition from a technology because it's used in a lot of different technologies, but it's becoming a monetary form of currency because of cryptocurrencies that, especially in Saudi Arabia, they're creating a cryptocurrency that's backed with silver. There's a lot of other cryptocurrencies that want to back themselves with gold, things of this nature. So what was he saying again there, though?
That the U.S. had 0% interest rates for far too long, and a gold standard
Yeah,
should be brought back. Yeah.
And if you're having these private companies or even governments like Saudi Arabia make a cryptocurrency that's actually backed with a piece of silver or a piece of gold, that could very much become more popular than dollars. And I think it's a lot more honest than dollars. The Chinese government, as much as I don't like a lot of the things they're doing, they're actually making vaults all around the world, putting massive amounts of gold so you can trade your yen for gold at any time because they want to build trust on a global scale so people trust the yen. So they want to back every piece of yen with a piece of gold and allow you to go to one of their vaults to exchange that at any point in time. It's a lot more than the US government is doing. They're devaluing their currency. I'm actually scared at one point the United States will either make two currencies or devalue one of those currencies so they can pay off their national debt in quick fashion. They have $37 trillion. That's very easy to pay off if you completely devalue the currency. The one way to do that would be to make an internal and an external currency. Okay.
He knows a lot more about that than I do.
Oh,
Sean,
plus there is, there used to be the silver, all the bullion markets were based in the United States. So that would dictate the price. They're highly manipulated. The government comes in there and you'll see big falls. That's not normal stock trading, but there's new exchanges. I believe they're being made in Hong Kong, but they're definitely being made by China, and Saudi Arabia is getting in on the action too. So it's a lot harder to control the precious metal markets now because there's multiple players in the market. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Sean also says USA should adopt Mexican laws regarding property ownership to Mexicans on the coast. I guess to Americans on the coast. So, because in Mexico, you can't really own property if you're a foreigner. You have to do a bunch of things or invest a bunch of money. There are a lot of restrictions around owning property, especially exactly on the coast or with beachfront.
Well, there's a workaround where you can start a corporation and then buy Mexican property that way. But at least it makes it a little bit harder. But I'm all for extremely hard laws. Non-citizens shouldn't be owning property. Corporations within the country should have to justify why they need a certain amount of property. They shouldn't just be able to buy property for speculation purposes to kind of hold money or have a store of value.
And it's crazy to me also in the US how much people, like the lefties, complain about, for example, ID, voter ID. Here we have a specific card too as our voter ID, and you have to show it, otherwise you can't vote. But also regarding, for example, the anti-ICE protests and the LA riots that we saw earlier this year in LA, with a lot of Mexicans or kids of immigrants shouting and yelling and protesting and burning cars, etc. Here, if a foreigner, a tourist, somebody that's not a Mexican, either citizen or resident or permanent resident, temporary resident, I think temporary residents can't even do it. They can't go to protest. You can't support or go protest in a political fashion or in a political sense, or just I think anything in general. You could get arrested. Again, the government doesn't fully work here, so they don't have the means. But technically, it's within our laws that you can't protest if you're a foreigner on Mexican territory for anything. You can go film, you can go work to film and etc. I did check that before we went, but there are those laws, and then there's people in the U.S. Complaining and saying, "Oh, this is draconian, etc." Here, you could technically get arrested if you're a foreigner supporting a protest or political movement.
Voter ID is becoming a huge issue in the United States.
And that's dangerous too.
The citizenry is demanding it. You don't need a digital ID to do that. It's a classic bait and switch they're going to create. They're going to say, "We need voter ID. We need voter ID. Oh, here's your digital ID." You wanted voter ID? Well, now you got it. You don't need a digital ID to be a voter ID.
Yes.
It comes with too many strings. It comes with millions of strings. Their whole social credit system or anything they want to build, whether it's a digital currency, carbon credit, has to be built upon a digital ID. So I think it's going to be a classic bait and switch in the United States.
Same with border security. They could also bring in, because as we see every time they're trying to implement digital IDs, it's either children's safety online or safety in general or jobs in the UK. But all of that is a good way to get people to adopt digital ID. In the US, they have the perfect excuse of the border and of voter ID, which both sides, not both sides, but most people would say, okay, yes, fine. But the problem is they would do it through the digital ID. And we do see Trump getting very buddy-buddy with
Palantir.
Not Palantir, the other guy. Larry Ellison, who's been talking about the virtues and then how much he wants to implement
you shouldn't
digital
speak
ID.
that name. They'll censor us almost instantly. I'm just
Sorry.
joking.
And Rafa says, I agree, Guy. Just really graceful. Said corporations are not citizens and they shouldn't have the same rights.
Well, like I said before, I mean, property value would be next to zero. It would be a few $1,000s if external immigrants couldn't buy land, as well as corporations couldn't buy land, or people couldn't buy an absorbent amount of land it's really building in speculation. And one of the most important needs for a citizen to have is cheap land of their own, and also then food. But there's too much speculation. It's one of the big industries where people want to try to store their value of money in land because it's always going up. So the government is constantly manipulating that market.
And Sean says, I can't come to Mexico and to fly around my American flag and try to burn down government buildings. That's so strange. I mean, even if you're Mexican, as we saw with the November 15th protest, you can't do that even if you're Mexican. If you're dissenting again and in opposition to the government, they'll get the riot police, which our president said that we didn't have anymore, to come hit you in the head and to put you in jail especially if you're a young Gen Z kid. And now she's sending all these young Gen Z kids to the military.
Yeah.
So no, you can't even do that if you're Mexican, apparently.
Okay, let's go into maybe the next article.
Yes.
we're not going to get through all the articles.
We can end with this, I think.
What?
With this next thing, because it goes to, I think, everything we've been talking about, but this is about Canada.
And this was recently released by a constitutional attorney in Canada. I just watched the interview with him about writing this article. Very interesting. I'm finding that more constitutional attorneys are starting to appear in social media, and I absolutely love them. Robert Barnes is probably the best constitutional attorney within the United States. He has a podcast, their Sunday episode. They go over all the stories of the week that are big constitutional stories. And they are really doing God's work at this point, a lot of these constitutional attorneys.
So yes, from it's a Justice Center report, Justice for Canadian Freedom. I don't remember what the name is, but manufacturing consent, government behavioral engineering of Canadians inside the government of Canada's covert effort to steer citizens' beliefs, emotions, and behaviors.
And this isn't
by
just
Nigel Hannaford.
This isn't just going on in Canada. This is going on in especially a lot of Western countries right now.
Yeah, so it's the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. There we go. I kind of knew it because they helped me when I had a COVID ticket to my name.
What is the COB ticket? So just people
So
might not know.
I never got the jibby jab, if you know what that means, because we're still on YouTube. Hold on. I never got the jibby jab. So I got a ticket from the Canadian government. It was pretty high. And I self-represented myself in the Queen's Court at that time, in court. And I learned a lot of how to do that, how to use the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to explain why I was allowed and I had the freedom to not get the jibby jab and to get that ticket taken away. Luckily, eventually, I went to court like 3 or 4, maybe more times to plead my case essentially by myself. And it was pretty high. I don't even fully remember. It was around 6 or 7 thou. And eventually they did drop it wasn't charges. They dropped the tickets because they realized that they weren't going to be able to implement them because of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and because of what people were actually arguing in courts by self-representing. So eventually the Canadian government dropped it because they realized how dumb their case was against their own people. You done?
Yeah, I'm done. I had to use the restroom real quick, so I'm glad you had to tell a story.
So I'm just going to read a little bit. This report examines how the Government of Canada has incorporated behavioral science and legislative mechanisms to shape public attitudes, restrict expression, and manage dissent. Though through the Impact and Innovation Unit, IIU, in the Privy Council Office, federal officials have implemented strategies drawn from so-called nudge theory to influence citizen behavior under the guise of evidence-based policy. These methods expanded dramatically during the era of COVID lockdowns and jibby-jab passports, like with me, shifting from communication improvement to deliberate psychological conditioning aimed at securing compliance. The Justice Center urges, through scrutiny of such behavioral programs, to preserve transparent representative governance in Canada.
And this was the military that was involved in this as well. So this was kind of like a military mind control project so they can get the citizens to do what they want. All this information is just coming out. This was almost $1 billion program just within itself. And then they also directed or it's believed they directed other campaigns that were like $1 billion campaigns in advertising to kind of nudge the population in the direction they thought was best. That being said, it ended up not being based upon evidence. So
from the introduction, I'll just read a little bit. Over the past decade, the Government of Canada has increasingly employed behavioral science to influence public attitudes and actions, raising concerns about the ethics and implications of such strategies. Through the Impact and Innovation Unit, housed within the Privy Council Office, the government has developed a sophisticated framework for shaping citizen behavior, invariably under the guise of public safety or societal good. Initially modeled after the United Kingdom's so-called nudge unit, the IIU's activities have been expanded significantly, most notably during lockdowns and jibby-jab passports, when it was directed to explore ways of promoting compliance with public health measures. Initially, the IIU, it was to popularize masking and social distancing. By the end of 2020, the focus had shifted to justifying and popularizing the Government of Canada's mass jibby-jab campaign. This report examines the IIU's operations, its relationship with the Privy Council Office and the Prime Minister's Office, and the broader implications of the government's use of behavioral science, PSYOPs, as it has been described, drawing on primary sources, including government reports, websites, and also information published in the national press and studies by the Justice Center. We argue that these initiatives constitute a form of manipulative social engineering that undermines the democratic principle of governing citizens as they are, with full respect for their human rights and their tax dollars, rather than governing citizens as the government might wish they were.
Well, yeah, and this program ended up being very successful, I guess, and it's still going on to this day. The issue here is a lot of people are thinking, well, if they're using it for these situations, why wouldn't they use it in elections? And if you look, we used to live in Canada. I mean, they are lockstep social liberals. And there's no way they're going to vote against that. I always thought there was a program like this because there was just way too much compliance, more govern me harder, daddy kind of attitude. And even maybe it's just because I grew up in the States for a lot of my life, but the level of compliance in Canada is scary, even when it is against the citizens' interest.
And especially because I think because I think I grew up in Mexico, and we have this kind of natural distrust of government, which is actually very healthy to have. And we're always questioning our government because we know of the corruption and it's so blatant and clear. In Canada, they've been able to hide it a lot more, not so much anymore, but I mean, most people wouldn't think of Canada as this hugely corrupt country, which it is, and how hugely influenced with external influences country, but it is. And for the longest time, you and I kept saying they're all behaving like sheep. They're even self-censoring. Like I was talking with a friend one time. She's Mexican too. And she was saying something about a guy and she said, a white man. But like she had to really like say quietly. And I said, why did you say that big quietly? And she was like, oh, I don't know. Because we were outside. And I was like, you're self-censoring and you're not even noticing you're doing it. And that's essentially what they've been able to do, both with like the cultural battle and wokeism and etc., but also with actual policy and actual ways of shaping society and governing them even more, not as they are, but as they wish they were.
Well, and I think it's very possible they're getting results back from this program, and what they're realizing is immigrants, especially immigrants that aren't natural English speakers or English isn't the first language, are much more susceptible to programs like this. So every dollar they put into a program like this goes a lot farther to getting the result that they want. Mm-hmm. And they, especially in Canada, they really have complete control over the media apparatus. Yes. So
it's subsidized by the government, like CBC, CTV, all of the big news agencies are subsidized by the Canadian government. So of course they owe them what they report, how they report on
there's variations of these programs within the EU as well, and you could suspect possibly the US as well.
And this was modeled after the UK's nudge unit.
Yeah,
so.
But why are they so aggressively pushing immigrants into the country? Because they're easily controllable, especially if you have programs like this.
And of course, and they're also going to be scared of not complying because they could be kicked out of the country, or that's what they think, or that's what they've been led to believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to work with a ton of immigrants, especially when we were trying to leave Canada to move to Mexico. I had 4 jobs. I was working almost 90, I think it was 90 to 100 hours a week. Yeah. And it was strange because there was a lot of quotas put in place at that time. So you had to have a certain number of immigrants and people of other races. It ended up being just a ton of Indian and Chinese immigrants, but mainly Indian immigrants I was working with. Mm-hmm. And it was very interesting talking to them because they would just have, all their information would come directly from the mainstream media. They would completely believe it. But when you would ask some simple questions, because I'm one of the few conservatives within Canada that would actually ask a question. Yes. They became very confused. And then they started asking questions. And then I'd say, why don't you look at independent media? And within a month, it would completely break down. Yeah. But for the most part, they never look to those alternative sources, or they don't know how to.
Mm-hmm. Or they don't know they exist.
And they also think all Canadians think like this. So this is how this is how I should be a good citizen.
So in a way, it's a way of them trying to integrate, but integrating to the kind of worst parts of Canada.
And it was very interesting because you would have a lot of Sikh Indians, and in Sikh culture, revolution is a normal thing. Resistance to the government is a normal thing. But even them, when they would come to Canada, like I would talk to them because we do real estate photography once in a while, and they would have these big pictures of Sikh people fighting revolution. And if you would talk to them, they would be very oriented, like, don't be so trustful of the government. Mm-hmm. But when it came to the Canadian context, because they were immigrants and they were just coming to a better situation, they were completely willing to kowtow to the Canadian government, not realizing somebody has to push back on the government to push the government in the right direction. Otherwise, you're just going to end up in a communist society that's extremely authoritarian.
Canada. And especially with the Indian, not just Indian immigrants, but all immigrants, at least when, like, towards the last 6 months that we were about to leave, we did start hearing more and more people that had almost just emigrated to Canada within the last year saying, this is not what they told me it was, this is too expensive, this is impossible, I can't stay here, I'm going to go back. So a lot of people were actually planning on leaving as well. And we have seen a mass exodus from Canada, especially with newer immigrants.
Well, yeah, and I also worked in a bar as security, so I would talk to a lot of people coming through the door, and it would be the same people over time. So you would see somebody that just immigrated to the country, and what would happen it would usually take 2 to 3 years before they would wake up and realize Canada wasn't the dream they were sold, because it looked good on the surface, but then they realized, well, I got to work 3 jobs just to pay rent on a 1-bedroom apartment and afford food. But by the end, these immigrants were waking up within 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
It was insane. And it was dropping lower and lower. Immigrants would, first it was 2 to 3 years, then it was a year. And then by the time we left, I was working with a lot of immigrants that came directly from India, own their own house back in India. And they're like, I need to find a way to get back to India because this is not what was sold to me.
And unfortunately, a lot of people do sell their homes, their cars, everything
They
they
get
have.
trapped in Canada.
Exactly. Because they're told by the Canadian government and by propaganda from the Canadian government that it's going to be so much better there, but then they arrive and it's completely, I mean, it's almost looking the same as where they're coming from, where they're trying to escape from.
Yeah, and the government, especially in Canada, but it's happening in a lot of Western countries. Donald Trump is kind of going the other direction now, which I like, but they're not adapting to the society, or they're not adopting the culture in any way, shape, or form. The government themselves is telling them to keep their own culture. There is no Canadian identity. So it's really hard to create a unified country when all these little communities are literally, the Indian community lives in a place called Surrey in Canada. They'll leave there to only for downtown. Then Richmond is where all the Chinese people live. It's like these little silos of all these little groups that really aren't adopting a larger Canadian identity or Canadian values or a moral foundation. And even if Christianity is the traditional moral foundation of, say, Canada, and I understand people have other religions, they would still understand the laws and other things that were based upon those Christian values, and they would accept them. Now it's just like, no, this isn't my culture. This isn't my religion. I'm not going to accept any of those values. We're going to change the law in your country. Your country is going to become a Muslim country, or whatever their specialty group or interest is.
And because that has been allowed by the government, the ruling party, the elites, because they want that chaos, because that chaos makes everything easier to control. From Sean says, this sounds like what the CIA does in America now, propagandize to the citizens things they want. And I think they might be doing that with digital ID.
It's to a different extreme in Canada.
Yes.
Because there's only one real acceptable pattern of behavior. At least in the States, you have Republican and Democrats, and then you might find libertarian trains of thought, things like this. So at least there's media apparatus where you might bounce around, and there's a strong independent media still. In Canada, there's not. The mainstream media has one voice, one acceptable opinion. Now in Canada, and it's already happening in the EU, they're trying to get social media companies to censor so it doesn't go outside of acceptable thought. So one of my favorite Canadian YouTubers, God, I forgot his name now. I was watching him this morning. He just moved to Texas. He's bringing a lot of people to Texas with him. So, I can't remember his name. I can watch it later. Okay. I watch him quite often. You'll know him.
Clay?
Yeah.
Okay. Clay Travis.
Yeah.
I think.
No, not Travis.
Clay
Travis.
Clay do something.
Yeah.
That's his name on YouTube.
Clay Travis is the country singer.
Okay. My brain's stopping. It's starting to switch to Spanish now. Sean says, California used to be a very individualist state, but the population was replaced by immigrants, and it's the most progressive state.
California is very strange because
in general.
Just the way the culture is, they don't really have a culture anymore, but there's all these little monocultures, and then there's this through line of socialism is going to help us and save us all.
Yes.
Because capitalism is evil, but capitalism has freed more people in society than any other system. And that being said, I do understand corporate capitalism is kind of consolidating wealth at the top, but we can try to fix the system. We can try to do something. I think that's what Trump is trying to do with tariffs. So we shouldn't give up on something that has given us so much. Maybe try to adjust it, or try different capitalist systems in smaller countries. See if it actually works. And that's the beauty of having so many countries around the world. You can try different things in different countries, and the ones that fail, don't try that again. Or if you try it again, make adjustments. And then countries that succeed, other countries can adopt those models. But if a globalized government comes and there's just one rule of law everywhere and one basic system, if things go wrong, it's going to be really hard to course correct.
Yes. especially because there will be an incentive for all countries to not want to steer away from it.
Yeah.
Or a coercion,
well,
which
and
would
there'll
be
be a
worse.
consolidation of power.
Yes. Sean says, divide and conquer is a good fit for postmodernism, oppressor victim narrative. Exactly. And that's what we're seeing all over as well. And I mean, in California, especially.
Yeah.
And that is what governs them. But that is, again, where socialism and communism essentially comes from. That is the scheme. That is the basis. And that is the moral foundation of essentially of communism and socialism. But at the same time, they have no grounding moral foundation with the rejection of traditional values, Christianity, faith, religion, whatever, etc. And so the morals and the values and the traditions are always shifting. And that is why we see it never works, because there's never a consensus or something that unifies to that the single cemented moral foundation.
Well, it's interesting if you live in California to actually know where those policies come from, because I didn't know for a long time. And then if you start tracking the money, it actually, they're always implemented in Canada first. So they're implemented usually in Vancouver and very often in Montreal. So, but Vancouver is where a lot of the NGO money comes in. They test all these crazy socialist liberal policies. Once they're kind of tested out, they bring them down to Washington State, then Oregon, and then California, and then it goes across the country. On the other side, Montreal is on the East Coast. They usually test them out in Montreal and then bring them over to New York. So they go from California and New York, and then they spread across the United States from both sides.
Yeah, and I think,
but they're all this money is pumped into Canada and these NGOs in there.
And I think that's also being in Vancouver as that was happening and as it ramped up. But this was way back in 2015, 16, the real ramp up started. I used to be super woke when I got to Canada. I used to be super progressive, all in favor of it. I loved Vancouver. But then seeing that encroachment accelerate of all these policies and of all these narratives and ideologies that eventually it made me say, what the hell am I supporting? I think it was actually helpful to me to be in Vancouver, where it was essentially the birthplace of all of these terrible ideas, and then the implementation of them and seeing the failure 10 years before even it most started happening in the US and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's very interesting how those policies do come from.
And now they're starting to implement it here in Mexico, which is even crazier. It's like I'm watching failure, like from the future. I'm trying to tell people in Spanish, stop it, don't fall for it,
Yeah,
But
it's not an accident. It's just they test all these ideas out in Vancouver. This was actually corporate policy. So corporations like Nike and other big corporations always like to use Vancouver as their test products that they don't bring out on a large scale, but they tried it on a small scale first to see if it works. Why? Because there are so many different groups that are siloed into their own little communities. So it's a perfect little test area where they know how's the Indian community going to respond to this? How's the Asian American community going to respond? How is this community? So they really get a lot of data points from a lot of different siloed groups. And then the NGOs realized for socialism, they use the same model as a lot of these corporations like Nike used.
And again, I'm going to mention the culture war on Tim Pool, where they were talking with the Brits and the Americans are talking together about this.
You watched it. You said it was great.
Yeah, it was good because they said a lot of things that a lot of us are thinking, but it just never gets told because nobody has the to say it. So
why are you self-censoring?
Because YouTube, and because I don't want to be rude. I'm a lady, supposedly. But they were saying that now, and I also watched this great video about how car design has changed to suit the tastes of China more than, and of electric vehicles more than the tastes of the West. And that's why we see so many ugly cars nowadays and so many rounded cars nowadays that are not manly anymore. But I mean, that video really went into it. But the video I'm talking about with Tim Pool and the culture war, he's not on it, but it's called The Culture War on Tim Pool. They were talking about how now, I mean, because I'm guessing partly because of those tests with different communities, a lot of the taste has been shifted towards what people in India and China and et cetera like, and away and kind of reinserted back into the US, but it's something that completely clashes against the aesthetic, I have to say the aesthetic or the art, I wouldn't even know how to describe it, but the tastes of the Western culture. But now we're getting, but a lot of gaudy things and a lot of these big brand names and et cetera coming up with things that would attract people elsewhere, not so much people in the West. And now we're being fed that back.
Yeah.
I didn't explain that properly. Sorry, I tried. Sean says, Marx called it dialectical materialism. Yes, exactly. Thank you. Sean also says, Vancouver, BC was such a beautiful city too. Sad to hear about it going downhill. It went downhill. Like in the 10 years I was there, each year it got worse and worse.
And it's so beautiful, and that's the shame. And Canada,
don't even think it's beautiful.
in general, is beautiful, especially in the summertime. But
The city itself is not beautiful.
well, no, maybe not the city itself, but Vancouver's never about the city.
I know.
It's all about nature,
was
and
there.
within 20 minutes you can be in the mountains or to the sea. And like the city's actually very small there, and Canada's very broad-reaching. When you look at the forest in Canada, when you're driving through some of these mountains, you're like, yeah, Bigfoot could definitely exist because there is just
No way.
millions of acres of untouched, pristine forest there. And they're selling a lot of that into China.
Yeah.
They're selling their water, their mineral rights to China. 70% of mining companies are based in Canada,
But they're
but
Chinese.
90% of those are owned by Chinese. They just pretend that,
They're
these
Canadian.
are Canadian companies now.
Yeah, so all the mining companies from Canada that are going down to Chile and trying to exploit a lot of untouched land down there as well are actually Chinese, but
Yeah.
labelings as Canadian. And Sean says, same with Portland. And what I don't like about Vancouver, the city, is that it's very modern, except for certain parts that pretend it to be older. They destroyed the actual city, and it also got burned
Well, it
down
got
by a
burned
fire.
down.
I know. But they didn't reconstruct it like they should have. But it's all glass and concrete. So it's like you're walking out into a dystopian future every time. And then you see the homeless guy over there ODing, and then you see the human feces over there, and then the needles over there, and then the people yelling at you, and then the people that don't speak the same language as you on the street. So it's like walking around in a dystopian novel
And it's
of what the
actually,
rest of the world will look like.
it's actually a little bit crazy because Canada has one of the lowest populations, but more landmass than virtually every other country except I think Russia. And they just build up. Everybody lives in these little shoebox
Yes.
apartments. They charge $1 million for all these shoebox apartments.
For a one-bedroom
They
apartment.
don't call them apartments. When I moved to Canada, they said, my buddy said, I just bought a house. I said, oh yeah, I'll come see it. It's this little tiny apartment for $1 million. And I'm like, oh, I thought you said it was a house. And he goes, well, that's what we call apartments in Canada are houses.
And I think also, I mean, we could continue to go into it, but a lot of it also has to do with foreigners buying property, building buildings, and then leaving them empty, which has inflated to the point of about to be a bubble collapse in Canada of real estate. Is also what has inflated the prices. And
Well-
they try to control it now when they realize the chaos that they've brought upon the country, but they can't.
Yeah, the average price of a condo is just insane. I think it's like $600,000 or $700,000, and they did a calculation. If there was no foreign investment into Canada, it would have been $80,000. So it's craziness.
And it's all built wrong, built with terrible techniques coming from the buildings that fall apart in China. Now those construction companies are in Vancouver building these giant buildings that then flood, and all the elevators flood. We were about to go see. We had to move before we left to come here. We had to move, and we were going to see one in this, like, with the newest tower that's all fancy.
It was
And
like-
it had flooded within 3 months that people had been living there.
Yeah.
Completely all flooded all the way down, like a
It was
waterfall.
actually well architecturally designed for a glass building. It was,
don't like
it
it.
was different.
It's ugly.
But yeah, I started to look online, and the entire thing was like a waterfall inside. There's just water coming out. There's mold in all the apartments. I had a major mold issue with one of our old apartments.
Yeah.
That's why we had to move. I had severe mold poisoning. I know a lot of Canadians that actually get mold poisoning because of the construction techniques they use over there, and it's
Everything's cheap, everything's badly done.
Yeah.
There's no air circulation because it's always so cold and wet, especially in Vancouver. So
okay. Let's go to the third from the last story. Let's just do the last 3 stories on the list.
on RUMBLE or here?
Yeah, we can do them on RU and BLE.
Because we only have 5 minutes to go.
Well, we'll go for 15.
But I have to do my Spanish.
I know,
show.
we'll go for
But I have to
15.
prep.
It's fine. Come on.
It's fine. Why do you want to do these stories so bad?
Okay.
Because these we can't do on YouTube.
Okay, then go to RU and BLE.
Okay. So,
Okay, we're-
hold on. So, Sean, Rafa, thank you so much for all your comments. Same with Psychic. We're going over to RUMBLE. I don't say the name because YouTube doesn't like it. So, we'll continue the show, the last 3 stories there. Same channel name,
Yeah.
And please do like and subscribe here on YouTube because we are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. And I do have a show in Spanish after this one at 9:30 Mexico City time. Sean says, I'm done, by the way. You guys are great. Thank you. You are great too. Thank you for all your comments
Adios.
as well. And Rafa, thank you so much too. It's what we like. It's why we like to do the show, to see what other people
Yeah.
are thinking.
And
And it
I'm
gets us
glad-
on a roll.
I'm glad people are starting to comment because
Yes.
your show, you had a bunch of comments, but it really helps the show have a much better flow.
Yes. So thank you so much. We'll see you over at RUMBLE in a second.
Okay, let me log in over there now.
Okay, I'm gonna remember. Hold on.